Chapter 55. Everything was ready. Poplar Fruit touched all the tools on the table and silently recited the process. He felt that he had everything he needed, so he sat down next to Duan Xueqing. Duan Xueqing was like a frightened rabbit. She looked up in surprise and shyly looked at Poplar Fruit, but she didn't move away. Poplar Fruit didn't notice Duan Xueqing's gaze. He placed a soft towel on his lap, then gently lifted Kiki, who was lying quietly in the rocking chair, and let her lie flat on his lap. Poplar Fruit's right hand gently brushed Kiki's head and touched her smooth and thin hair. Kiki's hair had slowly turned from brown to black. It was very different from the light yellow hair she had when she was just born. Poplar Fruit picked up a small comb and wet it in the basin of warm water on the coffee table. Then he gently combed Kiki's hair a few times to let it get some moisture. Poplar Fruit then picked up the small clipper and gestured on Kiki's head. Of course, the small clipper didn't appear in front of Kiki's eyes. He tried his best not to make Kiki panic. Duan Xueqing then understood what Poplar Fruit was going to do. She nervously grabbed her skirt and pursed her lips, not daring to make a sound. Kiki seemed to feel something, and she twisted on her father's leg. Poplar Fruit quickly put down the small clipper and stroked her chest to calm Kiki down. Finally, Kiki calmed down, and Poplar Fruit picked up the small clipper again. This was the first time he shaved Kiki's hair, and it was also Kiki's first haircut. Poplar Fruit felt a little nervous. He took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. When his hands stopped shaking, Poplar Fruit began the next step. Poplar Fruit's left hand was gently holding Kiki's head. If Kiki suddenly turned her head, he could exert force to control her head and prevent her from getting hurt. Poplar Fruit opened the small clipper with his right hand. After he started it, the clipper almost didn't make any sound. Poplar Fruit nodded with satisfaction. The silent effect was really good. The small clipper had been lubricated, and Poplar Fruit wasn't very worried that it would get stuck. Originally, there was a positioning comb in the package, but Poplar Fruit didn't plan to put it on. The positioning comb looked long and sharp, and Poplar Fruit was worried that it would pierce Kiki's head. Moreover, Poplar Fruit trusted the feeling of his hands more. Then, Poplar Fruit moved the small clipper to a position close to Kiki's head. After estimating the distance, Poplar Fruit began to push from the forehead, along the curve of the head, and stopped near the top of the skull. The small clipper pushed the cut hair onto the towel, and a small tuft of soft hair accumulated. Kiki hummed twice and was about to squirm. Poplar Fruit hurriedly held her head and coaxed her a few times to calm her down. Poplar Fruit continued to push the hair on the forehead and temples. He used the same method repeatedly. Then, he gently turned Kiki's body over and pushed the hair at the back of her head to her feet. Fortunately, the hair at the back of her head was thinner. Before Kiki felt any discomfort, Poplar Fruit had already finished pushing. Next was the top of her head. Poplar Fruit had read that the top of a child's head was different from the rest of the hair. It played an important role in protection. Poplar Fruit didn't dare to be careless. When he pushed the clipper, he raised his hand a little higher, so that Kiki's top of her head was left with a little more hair. Finally, Poplar Fruit looked at Kiki's head again. The main thing was to trim it so that the hair looked smoother and there wouldn't be any gaps. Poplar Fruit put down the small clipper, picked up the soft brush, and gently swept the broken hair on Kiki's head onto the towel. Then, he picked up a small towel and wiped Kiki's forehead and temples. After cleaning up, Poplar Fruit put his palm under Kiki's armpit and lifted her up. She looked so beautiful from left to right. Poplar Fruit smiled with satisfaction. Duan Xueqing, who didn't dare to breathe loudly at the side, finally relaxed. Poplar Fruit turned his head and asked her, "Xueqing, come and see how my skills are?" Duan Xueqing nodded fiercely and said, "You cut it very well. Brother Yang, you're really amazing." Her eyes were about to pop out little stars. Poplar Fruit smiled proudly. He handed Kiki to Duan Xueqing's arms and asked her to help take a look. He wanted to clean up the mess. Poplar Fruit picked out the longer and better-looking hair from the towel. Then, he carefully put it into the small photo frame-like box and closed the glass lid. This was Kiki's baby hair souvenir album. After gently shaking the hair on the towel into the trash can, he rolled the towel into a ball and put it in the basin. Poplar Fruit raised his head and looked at Duan Xueqing. Duan Xueqing was really stiff now. She didn't know what to do with Kiki. She didn't have much experience in holding a child. Now that Kiki was lying on her lap, her two hands were stupidly supporting Kiki's shoulders. She felt very uncomfortable. Poplar Fruit found it funny. He quickly went over and took Kiki. Then he let her lie in the rocking chair first and didn't bother Duan Xueqing. Duan Xueqing breathed a sigh of relief. She glanced awkwardly at Poplar Fruit and felt a little regretful. Poplar Fruit didn't spend too much time cleaning the small clippers, small combs, and other tools. Then, he put Kiki's baby hair souvenir album on the cabinet in the bedroom. After that, Poplar Fruit didn't have time to take care of Duan Xueqing. He turned on the computer so that Duan Xueqing wouldn't be bored out of her mind. Then he went to bathe and feed Kiki. Although Poplar Fruit was really thoughtful, Duan Xueqing sat alone in front of the computer, listening to Kiki's giggles and Poplar Fruit's pretentious laughter and scolding. She felt a little out of place. She was like a snow lotus planted in the mortal world. No matter how beautiful she was, it was difficult for her to truly fit in. Duan Xueqing didn't know why, but when she thought that she couldn't fit in with the happy atmosphere of Poplar Fruit's family, her heart felt very uncomfortable. She felt that her mind was in a mess. The mouse wheel was unconsciously scrolling. She didn't pay attention to the content of the webpage at all. It seemed that this was the first time in Duan Xueqing's life that her heart was in such a mess. She didn't know what to do and sat in front of the computer in a daze. Then, Poplar Fruit poked his head in from the door and asked with a smile, "What are you looking at?" Duan Xueqing came back to her senses. She pretended to fix the hair on her forehead and said hurriedly, "No, nothing." "Haha, it's okay. You continue playing. I'll take Kiki to change." Kiki, who was tightly wrapped in the quilt, also poked her head out to look around like her father. However, her intonated laughter gave her away. Poplar Fruit stroked Kiki's hair, which was still a little wet, and carried her back. After changing clothes and feeding her, Poplar Fruit carried Kiki to the rocking chair, then moved the chair to the dining room. He called Duan Xueqing over and said to her, "I'm going to cook. Help me take care of Kiki." Poplar Fruit also considered that Duan Xueqing didn't know how to carry a child, so he simply let Kiki lie in the rocking chair. This way, Duan Xueqing could rock the chair, and Kiki liked it. "Okay." Duan Xueqing nodded seriously. After watching Poplar Fruit put on an apron and walk into the kitchen, Duan Xueqing half squatted on the ground, reached out her white jade finger, and hooked it on Kiki's little face. Kiki didn't ignore Duan Xueqing like before. After all, they had met a few times and spent some time together. She smiled, raised her little hand, and brushed it across Duan Xueqing's fingertips. Duan Xueqing felt as if an electric current flowed from her fingertips to her heart, and the confusion from before disappeared without a trace. At this moment, Duan Xueqing's beautiful face, which was used to being cold, suddenly bloomed with a beautiful smile. If Poplar Fruit saw this, he would definitely sigh in his heart and say, "A smile that can overturn a country, is that all there is to it?" Unfortunately, Poplar Fruit didn't have such a blessing. When he finished washing the rice and put it into the pot to cook, Duan Xueqing had already restrained the smile on her face. Only her cheeks were still slightly red, but under the dim lighting in the room, Poplar Fruit couldn't see it. "Xueqing, don't squat." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Pull up a stool and sit. You don't need me to teach you, right?" "Okay." Duan Xueqing moved a stool from the dining table over. She reached behind her back and gently lifted her long hair that reached below her waist. Then she sat on it, crossed her legs, leaned over, and slowly rocked the rocking chair with one hand, while playing a game with Kiki with the other. Kiki squinted her eyes in enjoyment and called out intermittently. Seeing that they were getting along so well, Poplar Fruit happily returned to the kitchen to continue cooking. The ingredients were bought during the day, but Poplar Fruit didn't take out fish or meat from the fridge. Duan Xueqing only ate bland food, so everything was simple. Stir-fried lettuce that only had green onions to enhance the flavor, golden and dazzling beef with egg, tender and white mushroom stir-fried tofu with minced meat, and winter melon and pork rib soup, that was stewed until the melon and meat were all bland. After some hesitation, Poplar Fruit finally made himself a plate of beef with oyster sauce. He was a carnivore, and if he only relied on the few strips of beef with egg without any oil, he definitely wouldn't be able to eat. Poplar Fruit walked out of the kitchen with the last of the winter melon and pork rib soup, and said to Duan Shueching with a smile, "Let's eat." He was busy in the kitchen for nearly an hour. Kiki was playing in the rocking chair, and almost fell asleep. Poplar Fruit picked up the sleepy Kiki, and let her go back to the room to sleep. When he came out, Duan Shueching stood by the dining table, and whispered to Poplar Fruit, "Why did you make so many dishes? It's just for the two of us." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "It's okay. If you can't finish it, the rest is mine." Duan Shueching really ate less than half a bowl of rice, and then she ate some more dishes. She only picked up a piece of beef with egg, but she ate a lot of lettuce and mushroom tofu. Finally, she drank 2 bowls of soup. In the end, she frowned and said to Poplar Fruit, "Brother Yang, the dishes you cooked are really good. I feel that I can't help but eat too much. I will become fat." Duan Shueching was still worried and touched her stomach. Poplar Fruit cleaned up the rest of the dishes. After swallowing the rice in his mouth, he smiled and said, "It can't be. I think you won't become fat no matter how much you eat." "I can't. I usually only eat 1 dish," Duan Shueching said. "It's okay." Poplar Fruit shook his head and said, "You have been working so hard recently. You consume a lot of energy. It's okay to eat a little more." Duan Shueching nodded. After eating, Duan Shueching hesitated and stood up to help clean up the dishes on the table. Poplar Fruit quickly stopped her and said with a smile, "Let me do it. Let me do it. How can I let you do this?" Not to mention Duan Shueching, who didn't do any household chores. Even if it was someone else, Poplar Fruit would be embarrassed to let the guests clean up the dishes. When Duan Shueching left, Poplar Fruit went out of the community to help her stop a taxi. Looking at the taxi leaving a trail of exhaust, Poplar Fruit shook his head and turned to go home. But tonight he was still alone in the house. And in Kiki. Chapter 56. The afterglow of the sunset shone through the glass window and through the long and narrow aisle. With the melodious piano sound, it swayed and exuded a quiet and elegant atmosphere. Poplar Fruit sat by the window, dressed in a suit and leather shoes. There was a rose on the table, and his right index finger tapped on the table from time to time. His thoughts drifted away in the strong coffee aroma that filled the space. Yes, Poplar Fruit was now doing the most ridiculous and vulgar thing in the world. A blind date. Back to the night when he sent Duan Shueching away, Song Jiwen went home for dinner. When he came back, he didn't bring back anything delicious. Instead, he brought back a piece of bad news. He conveyed Lu Suqin's order to Poplar Fruit, saying that she had contacted a girl for him, and asked him to meet her tomorrow evening. Poplar Fruit had a headache when he heard this. Lu Suqin didn't contact him last week, and he thought that Lu Suqin had forgotten about it. He didn't expect that in the end, he still couldn't escape this disaster. Yang Gui didn't want to give up and called Lu Suqin. She wanted to find an excuse to get out of it. However, Lu Suqin scolded Poplar Fruit over the phone and said, "You stay at home all day. What can happen to you? You still want to lie to me?" Not only that, but the old lady also came over early this morning to supervise in person to prevent Poplar Fruit from lying to his heart and refusing to go in the end. The old lady came with a murderous look, which scared the kitten who had just come out of Song Jiwen's room. However, the old lady didn't care about her son's girlfriend. She knew Song Jiwen's nature. She didn't know when he would dump her. If she made friends with her now, wouldn't it be more awkward in the future? She nodded and greeted them indifferently and ignored them. The suit in Poplar Fruit's wardrobe was the one he wore to work a few months ago. Looking at it now, it didn't fit anymore. The trousers couldn't cover Poplar Fruit's legs at all. Therefore, the old lady hurriedly dragged Poplar Fruit to the shopping mall. Even Song Jiwen and the kitten, who wanted to slack off at home, had to follow along. With a bitter smile on his face, Poplar Fruit helplessly listened to the old lady's instructions and let the shop assistant take his body length, arm length, and hip circumference. During this period of time, Poplar Fruit felt that the increase in his height had slowed down. A few days ago, he secretly measured himself. Now he was a little over 184 meters tall. He estimated that in the end, another 2 centimeters would be the limit. This was also good. If he continued to grow, wouldn't he be seen as a weirdo walking on the streets? Recently, Poplar Fruit had grown more than 10 centimeters, and almost all of it had grown on his legs. Usually, when he wore shorts at home, he didn't pay attention. This time, when he came to the suit shop, he finally measured it for the shop assistant. His legs were 106 meters long. Heaven-defying. 106 meters long legs. If it was in the north, there might be some people who could reach this standard. But in the south, even in a city as big as Yangcheng, it was still extremely rare. This made the shop assistant very worried, because Lu Suqin only wanted ready-made clothes and didn't want to order them. It was too late to order them. The shop assistant searched the warehouse for a long time before she found a pair of trousers that fit Poplar Fruit's legs. She smiled and said, "This is the largest size in our shop. If it still doesn't fit, then we'll have to order it." After picking out a fitting shirt, a casual suit jacket, and a belt, Poplar Fruit walked into the changing room to change. As the saying goes, Buddha relies on gold, and people rely on clothes. This sentence was best used on Poplar Fruit. When he walked out of the changing room, the first person he saw was Song Jiwen. His glasses fell to the ground. Then Xiao Mao was stunned. The shop assistant was stunned. The other customers in the shop were also stunned. Thick eyebrows like swords, black eyes like stars, a tall and slightly hooked nose, and a handsome and angular face. Perhaps because he noticed that people were looking at him, Poplar Fruit's mouth showed a trace of an embarrassed smile. He looked like a shy and charming young man. If you only looked at his face, Poplar Fruit had the potential to be a pretty boy. The most eye-catching thing was his pair of long legs, which looked so slender and powerful against the backdrop of his well-ironed trousers, making the eyes of all the girls present emit little stars. Poplar Fruit practiced boxing every day, so he had maintained a good figure. Although his appearance didn't look thick, there wasn't a trace of fat on his waist and abdomen. The casual suit looked even better at the waist. If he said that he was a model, people would probably believe him. Someone once said, "If you want others to think that you are handsome, a 1.5-meter tall boy needs a face that can turn people upside down. A 1.6-meter tall boy needs a face that is as bright as the stars. A 1.7-meter tall boy needs a face with delicate features. A 1.8-meter tall boy needs a face with regular facial features. And a 1.9-meter tall boy can be shameless." Although this was a big exaggeration, it did indeed illustrate the aesthetic concept of modern people. If one's height reached 1.8-meter tall, the face didn't seem to be that important. Before Poplar Fruit grew taller, his face could be rated 85 points. It wasn't to the extent that he could turn people upside down, but he was still a little handsome. But after growing taller, his appearance also rose. He jumped from the level of a little handsome to the level of an idol. The other female customers in the store were whispering to their companions. Poplar Fruit, who had sharp ears, didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard them whispering in surprise. "Is there a big star here today? How come I haven't seen him before? He's too handsome." Yes, look at his long legs. I want to hug them." Her companion looked at Poplar Fruit's legs with a love-struck expression. Poplar Fruit sweated and hurried to Song Jiwen's side. "Damn, Lao Gua, why didn't I realize before that you have the potential to be a model?" Song Jiwen said in surprise. He walked around Poplar Fruit and patted him. TSK, if you stand at the door wearing this, the store's business will definitely explode." The shop assistant also looked at Poplar Fruit with stars in her eyes. Hearing Song Jiwen's words, she nodded subconsciously. Then, she suddenly felt that her actions were inappropriate. She quickly stopped nodding and covered her mouth in embarrassment. Lu Suqin slapped the back of Song Jiwen's head and laughed. "How can you talk like that?" she said to Poplar Fruit with satisfaction. "Look at what you used to wear. A good clothes rack is ruined by you. It's like a pearl covered in dust. I think this set is very good. Look at how spirited it is." Poplar Fruit also liked it very much. After twirling in front of the mirror twice, he went to the fitting room to change and asked the shop assistant to pack it up. When he walked to the cashier, Poplar Fruit realized that the old lady had already paid the bill when he went back to the fitting room. Looking back, Poplar Fruit wanted to give the money back to the old lady, but Lu Suqin refused. Poplar Fruit could only accept the suit that cost more than 3,000 yuan helplessly. Sitting in the cafe, Poplar Fruit's fingers gently tapped on the table. Only then did he realize that the old lady was indeed astute. She gave him such expensive clothes to make him feel guilty and not dare to half-heartedly deal with this blind date. Poplar Fruit shook his head with a bitter smile and looked out the window. Kiki had been coaxed to sleep, and now the old lady was taking care of her. The two of them were sitting in Song Jiwen's car, and he didn't know where they were going. In any case, they had agreed to wait outside, but now the car was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, a shadow flashed above his left eye. When Poplar Fruit turned around, a white-collared lady was sitting in the booth opposite him. There was a women's wear magazine on the table. The white-collared lady looked pretty. She was wearing a black suit, a white embroidered blouse, and a short ponytail. She looked clean and neat, a typical white-bone spirit from a foreign company. Lu Yunran used to go to work like this, so Poplar Fruit was naturally familiar with her. "You are Mr. Poplar Fruit, right?" the white-collared lady asked naturally. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Yes. You are Miss Qin Xiuxia." Hearing Poplar Fruit say her name, the white-collared lady frowned and said, "You should call me by my English name, Kathy. That's what my colleagues and friends call me." Poplar Fruit shrugged his shoulders and said indifferently, "Okay." He stretched out his hand to call the waiter and turned to Qin Xiuxia and asked, "Kathy, what do you want?" Qin Xiuxia flipped through the menu and said, "Spaghetti bolognese and a fresh fruit salad. If you want to drink a cup of cappuccino, it must be hot." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "I want a sirloin steak. I heard from my friend that your steak is very delicious. Kathy, do you want one?" Qin Xiuxia shook her head. "Then I'll have one. If you want coffee, white mocha. I like it sweeter. Do you have any recommended dishes here?" Poplar Fruit asked the waiter and finally ordered a tiramisu cake. Then he closed the menu and let the waiter take it away. "Mr. Yang graduated from Higashiyama University?" Qin Xiuxia broke the silence and asked. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "That's right. By the way, Kathy, you don't have to call me Mr. Yang. Just call me by my name. Just call me Poplar Fruit." When Qin Xiuxia was ordering just now, she had a good impression of Poplar Fruit. Moreover, Poplar Fruit's image also gave him a lot of points. She nodded and asked, "Poplar Fruit, why didn't you choose to go abroad to further your studies after graduation? I heard that you also graduated with an English major." "Why? There's no reason. Firstly, I'm not interested in studying abroad. Secondly, I don't want to add more burden to my family," Poplar Fruit said. After listening to Poplar Fruit's answer, Qin Xiuxia nodded thoughtfully. She said regretfully, "What a pity. If you came back from studying abroad, the chances of getting an offer from a big company would be much higher. Of course, I'm not talking about salary. Just like my current company, PNC, the future development will be much better. This is unimaginable in a small company." Poplar Fruit smiled and didn't refute her. However, he began to feel that Qin Xiuxia was worshipping foreign things. Every 3 sentences, an English word would pop out. "Kathy, you came back from studying abroad? Which university did you go to?" Poplar Fruit asked. When she talked about her own glorious past, Qin Xiuxia's eyebrows danced as she spoke. After listening to her, Poplar Fruit knew that the woman in front of him, who praised studying abroad, was only in a third-rate university in the United States of America. It wasn't even ranked in the top 500 in the world. How did Poplar Fruit know? Because he once checked the ranking of Higashiyama University and looked at the list of the top 500 universities in the world. In his photographic memory, there was absolutely no such university that Qin Xiuxia mentioned. Although the name of the university that Qin Xiuxia mentioned sounded very impressive, Poplar Fruit was still certain that this university was not as good as Higashiyama University that he graduated from. Poplar Fruit didn't expose her, nor did he laugh at her. After all, She also spent a few years on the other side of the ocean to get a master's degree. It was considered a gold-plated degree. It was much more noble than his own degree. Chapter 57. When it came to her experience studying abroad, Qin Xiuxia was like a chatterbox. Under the guidance of Poplar Fruit, who used to be a foreign trade elite, she became happier and happier as she spoke. She almost revealed all of her details. Speaking of which, Qin Xiuxia did have the right to be proud. She was an overseas returnee, had a master's degree, and had a good appearance. Her job was also the kind that Poplar Fruit used to look up to. High monthly salary, high benefits, more than 15 months of salary a year, work location in the CBD center, and a comfortable high-end work environment. With her qualifications, she could indeed look down on most of the graduates in China. However, Qin Xiuxia's words expressed contempt for her domestic education, and small company work made Poplar Fruit feel a little uncomfortable, probably because she drank too much foreign ink. There were always some people in China who came back from studying abroad and boasted that they were superior. They thought that everything was good abroad, and nothing in China was pleasing to their eyes. It was as if they had been brainwashed by pyramid schemes. They thought that the outside world was beautiful, free, and vast, and that there were restrictions everywhere in China, and the system was rotten. But was that really the case? In fact, there was a dark side under any system. Some people only saw good things abroad and ignored the bad side. However, when they looked at China, it was the opposite and all the good things were ignored. Poplar Fruit was not superstitious about how good China was, but he also did not think that it was heaven abroad. Every year, so many people came back from studying abroad. Could it be that they did not know what was good and did not want to stay abroad? Wasn't it because they stayed abroad for too long and felt uncomfortable everywhere, and it was easy to encounter racial discrimination? In the end, they found that home was still the warmest. Therefore, although Poplar Fruit was too lazy to refute or correct these people's wrong views, he always felt unhappy when he heard such words. How could a person forget their ancestors? While the waiter was serving the dishes, Poplar Fruit interrupted Qin Xiuxia's leisurely talk and said with a smile, "Kathy, try the cooking of this cafe." He also kindly pushed the tiramisu cake in front of Qin Xiuxia. Qin Xiuxia's eating posture was very polite. She used the fork and spoon very pleasing to the eye when eating noodles. On the other hand, Poplar Fruit's knife and fork were somewhat clumsy when dealing with the steak in front of him. It wasn't that he hadn't eaten Western food before, but he only had a few experiences of eating with a knife and fork. In order to prevent the knife and fork from making a sharp sound on the white porcelain plate, Poplar Fruit struggled to cut the steak into pieces. The afterglow of the setting sun had already dissipated. The dim yellow lights of the coffee shop, coupled with the faint sound of the violin, made the atmosphere even more romantic and warm. However, Poplar Fruit was not in the mood to savor it. He was now blushing as he hurriedly finished the ugly steak in front of him. At this time, Qin Xiuxia was quite tactful. She didn't say anything about Poplar Fruit's actions. She picked up the cappuccino and took a sip. Then she picked up the tablecloth and wiped the corner of her mouth. She looked at Poplar Fruit and asked, "Poplar Fruit, what do you do now?" "Right now," Poplar Fruit thought and said, "I'm self-employed." Self-employed? Qin Xiuxia had gone on many blind dates, but this was the first time she met someone who said that he was self-employed. After all, it was possible to say that you were self-employed without a job. She asked in confusion, "Then do you want to open a company?" "Open a company? I don't have that plan right now." Poplar Fruit shook his head and said. Qin Xiuxia frowned and asked, "Then do you stay at home all day?" Looking at Poplar Fruit nodding, she asked again, "If you stay at home all day, how do you ensure your income? Do you need your parents to support you? You are the most useless group of people in this society." At this time, she realized that her tone was a little harsh. She was afraid that Poplar Fruit would be angry, so she quickly said, "Sorry, I don't mean that." No. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "I can understand what you mean, but you might have misunderstood. When I said self-employed, it doesn't mean that I don't have a job at all. I am a translator, so I can work at home. I don't need to go to work." "Translator, oh." Qin Xiuxia nodded thoughtfully and said, I understand. She hesitated and said, I also have a few friends. They are also in Poplar Fruit's line of work, but their salary is really not high, and this line of work is very tiring. Haha, it's just a hobby. Poplar Fruit laughed and said. Qin Xiuxia was now paying attention to Poplar Fruit's feelings, but Poplar Fruit still had some complaints in his heart. If they really calculated, it was really hard to tell whose income was higher and who was lower. After all, Poplar Fruit's monthly income was now at the level of 50,000 to 100,000. Speaking of tiring and hard work, Poplar Fruit wanted to laugh even more. What kind of work was harder than working in a foreign company, referring to the same salary? Foreign companies had to work more than 10 hours a day, and sometimes they had to work overtime on weekends. Poplar Fruit only translated for 5 to 6 hours a day, and the rest of the time was under his control. If there was anything, he could give himself a break at any time. When it came to tiring and hard work, there was really no comparison between the two. Poplar Fruit found that as they talked about money again. This was one of the reasons why Poplar Fruit didn't like to go on blind dates. He remembered seeing a joke before, about a man and a woman going on a blind date. The woman asked, Do you have a house with 3 bedrooms, 2 living rooms, and 2 bathrooms? Do you have a car? The man replied, No. The woman's face changed, and she stood up and pretended to leave. The man said, I have a villa. Why do I need to live in a small suite? I usually drive a sports car. Do I have to change to a car? The woman's butt landed again, and she smiled sweetly. The man continued, When I started my business, I mortgaged my villa and car, and now I don't have any cash. The woman was furious, stood up and said, I have something to do, I'll leave first. The man said, But fortunately, I got a venture capital investment from America, and the company went public. The woman turned and sat down, smiled, and the blind date continued. The man said, But recently, the IT market is not doing well, and the stock price has fallen below the issue price, and it's going to be closed soon. The woman stood up and said, I really have something to do, I want to leave. The man quickly said, Fortunately, my company was bought by Weibo, and I have a few $100 million in cash, and now I can make a comeback. The woman smiled charmingly, turned and sat down again and said, You're so bad, always teasing me. At this time, 2 doctors in white coats ran in, grabbed the man and scolded. You ran out of the hospital again, go back and take your medicine. This joke wasn't too funny, but it also reflected the essence of blind dates between men and women in modern society. In the end, it was all about income, whether they had a house or a car. Sometimes, the parents would even bring the blind date along, and when they met, they would ask questions like how much their monthly salary was. Poplar Fruit was very disgusted with this kind of blind date. Would there still be feelings for a marriage that was obtained in this way? Was love not important when money was the way? The reason why Poplar Fruit could talk to Qin Xiuxia for so long, besides Lu Suqin, was also because Qin Xiuxia did not do it so openly like the woman in the story. But in the end, it was impossible to be free from vulgarity. And in the end, they still had to talk about the key issue of money. Lu Suqin had told Poplar Fruit not to tell anyone that she had a child out of wedlock, and that he should say more good things on the first blind date. When the time was right, he could slowly talk about it. But Poplar Fruit really had no interest in Qin Xiuxia now. Although he had always been in agreement with her, Poplar Fruit's ideology was completely different from hers. Up until now, Qin Xiuxia had been trying to correct Poplar Fruit's wrong values and career outlook. How could he be willing to continue? Qin Xiuxia was actually a good person, and she was not a snobbish woman. When she talked about the salary, at most, she hoped that her future partner could be as responsible as she was. However, she should be looking for a partner in her own circle. She should find a man who was like-minded and could talk to her. In this case, Poplar Fruit felt that there was no need to waste everyone's time. He smiled and said to Qin Xiuxia, Kathy, I have something that I don't know if you know about. Qin Xiuxia put down the cup and asked curiously, What is it? Although I haven't been married, I already have a daughter. She's not even 1 year old yet, and I'm raising her. When he said this, Poplar Fruit saw a look of surprise and disbelief in Qin Xiuxia's eyes. This. Qin Xiuxia, who had always been talkative, didn't know what to say now. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, I said this mainly because I don't want to hide it from you. You see, we've talked for so long today, and it's time to let you know about such a big thing. If it's not suitable, we don't need to continue wasting time in the future, right? And if you can't accept it, I can understand. This is human nature. Poplar Fruit saw that Qin Xiuxia was in a dilemma, and simply gave her a way out. At this time, Qin Xiuxia also showed the ability and straightforwardness of a female elite working in a foreign company. She packed her bag, stood up, and reached out to Poplar Fruit. She said, I admire and appreciate your honesty, but this is a big matter of marriage. I really can't. Please understand. Poplar Fruit quickly stood up. He was at least 2 heads taller than Qin Xiuxia. Poplar Fruit leaned over to shake hands with Qin Xiuxia and said with a smile, It's okay. I can understand. So that's it for today. Qin Xiuxia walked out of the booth and said, Today it's on my treat. I know it's not easy for a man to raise a child. Poplar Fruit had just sat down, but he quickly stood up and said, No. Okay, you don't have to fight for it. Qin Xiuxia now fully showed the temperament of a strong woman. Before Poplar Fruit finished speaking, she pushed Poplar Fruit back to his seat, waved her hand heroically and said, Goodbye, we'll meet again in the future. She went to the front desk to pay the bill without any explanation, and only left Poplar Fruit with her back. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He stood up again, shook his head, and shouted gloomily in his heart, What's not easy? It's easy for me. I'm really rich. Poplar Fruit felt that his self-esteem was a little bit damaged after being sympathized with by a woman, and let her pay for the blind date. So be it. The first blind date of his life could be considered to have ended in a dramatic way. Poplar Fruit's right hand hooked the coat on his shoulder, and his left hand in his pocket, slowly walked out of the coffee shop. It was late at night, and the streets were brightly lit. People came and went on the sidewalk. It was so noisy. How could it be more comfortable than home? Poplar Fruit took out his mobile phone and called Song Jiwen. Although the car hadn't arrived yet, Poplar Fruit was ready to receive the old lady's reprimand. Chapter 58. Here comes the food. Poplar Fruit walked out of the kitchen with a smile. He was holding Kiki's milk bottle in his hand. He shook the milk inside and walked over to Kiki, as if he was showing off. Kiki was half lying in the rocking chair. She kicked her legs and looked at Poplar Fruit. She put the finger of her right hand into her mouth and moved her lips up and down. It was unknown whether she was biting or sucking. Aya Kiki, why are you eating your little hand again? Poplar Fruit frowned and squatted beside the rocking chair with a puzzled expression. Kiki looked at her father's enlarged face and felt very happy. She raised her left arm and waved it in the air. She almost touched Poplar Fruit's face, as if she wanted her father to taste it too. Poplar Fruit chuckled and reached out to pull Kiki's right hand out of her mouth. He stretched his head over and pretended to bite it. He said threateningly, Ow ow! If you don't listen to me, Daddy will eat you. Kiki's little hand that was covered in saliva had a milky fragrance, but it was wet. Poplar Fruit picked up the small handkerchief beside the rocking chair and wiped it for her. Kiki didn't understand, but she was amused by Poplar Fruit's actions. She kicked her legs high and touched Poplar Fruit's hair. She even grinned and laughed. Poplar Fruit carried Kiki out of the rocking chair and raised her in front of his face. He touched her forehead with his head and said, Still naughty. Still naughty. Kiki didn't want to be outdone and fought back. Poplar Fruit played with her for a while. Finally, he kissed her little face and happily took her back into his arms and began to feed her milk. Poplar Fruit looked at Kiki greedily, sucking the milk in the bottle and rubbing the pacifier at the front of the bottle. He suddenly understood. It turned out that Kiki liked to eat her own hand so much recently. It wasn't that she really thought that her white and tender hand was delicious, but that she treated her own hand as a pacifier. Poplar Fruit remembered reading a parenting book in the past. It analyzed the reasons why children ate their hands. One of the reasons was that children were attached to the source of milk. They would unconsciously put their little hand in their mouth and suck. This was especially true for artificially fed children. Every time the milk in the bottle was finished, the parents would take the bottle away. That way, they would have fewer chances to suck, and they would gradually turn to suck their own fingers. This situation would continue until the sucking reflex gradually disappeared. Only then would the situation slowly improve. There was another reason why children ate their hands. It was because when a child was about to teeth, the child's gums would feel uncomfortable. She would feel itchy and even painful. Then, she would crazily put her little hand into her mouth to relieve this uncomfortable feeling. No matter what the reason was, Poplar Fruit couldn't let Kiki eat her own fingers every day. Human skin would wrinkle or even break if it was soaked in water for a long time, let alone Kiki's delicate skin. Looking at Kiki, who was still desperately sucking the milk, Poplar Fruit thought to himself, "It's time to buy her a pacifier that she can bite on." At this time, Poplar Fruit's phone rang. However, Poplar Fruit was still feeding Kiki. His hands were not free, so he didn't pick up the phone. The phone rang for a long time before it stopped. Who was it? Poplar Fruit was very puzzled. He would call back later. Poplar Fruit noticed that the corners of Kiki's mouth were glistening. This was definitely not from when she was drinking milk. It should be because she had bitten her finger in her mouth just now, which stimulated her mouth to secrete more saliva. Then it flowed out. After Kiki finished drinking, Poplar Fruit quickly took a small towel to wipe the saliva from the corner of her mouth. After putting down Kiki in the rocking chair and putting away the milk bottles, Poplar Fruit finally had time to pick up the phone from the coffee table. "You can't eat your hand." Poplar Fruit reached out and pulled Kiki's right hand out of her mouth. He said, "Be good. Daddy will buy you a pacifier tonight." He turned his head and pressed the home button on the phone. The screen lit up. It was his mother. Poplar Fruit unlocked the screen and dialed back. "Hello, Mom." "Fruit, why didn't you answer the phone until now?" Su Jinfeng asked anxiously. Hearing Su Jinfeng's tone, Poplar Fruit became nervous. He quickly asked, "Mom, what happened at home?" "Nothing happened." "What happened at home?" Su Jinfeng asked back. "No, I'm going to faint." "If there's nothing wrong, why are you so serious?" "I thought something big happened. That gave me a fright. I was feeding Kiki just now, so I didn't have time to answer the phone." Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I'm worried about you. Fruit, don't take the train these days." That brother Tai, what's the name of the news?" Yang Gua could vaguely hear her father Yang Tai's gruff voice on the other end of the phone. "Train? What train? You didn't remember the train news said it so many times." Yes. I'm stupid. You're smart." Su Jinfeng scolded him, then turned back and said, "Fruit, yes, it's called a train. Don't take the train these days. The news is talking about it these days. It scared people to death. 2 big iron boxes collided and hundreds of people died." Su Jinfeng's words made Poplar Fruit feel that she was a little frightened. Poplar Fruit looked up and rolled his eyes. He was a little speechless. After a pause, he said, "Mom, did you see the train accident that happened last week?" "It happened a few days ago. The 2 trains collided for some reason. At that time the internet was abuzz. How could Poplar Fruit not know?" Yes, that's right. That's it." Su Jinfeng said. "How long has it been since this happened? You're only telling me now. And it's not as scary as you said. Hundreds of people died. The statistics on the news are out. 40 people died." Poplar Fruit said helplessly. "Is 40 people a small number? Didn't you see that the car flipped over? How good can the people be?" Su Jinfeng said unhappily. "I know. I also saw the pictures of the scene. It's quite tragic. But you don't have to be too scared. This kind of thing doesn't happen every day. How can it be so coincidental?" Poplar Fruit said, "I think you're not alert at all." Su Jinfeng seriously criticized Poplar Fruit's careless attitude. "It'll be over when you encounter it. Do you know? Do you think such a big thing is a coincidence? It's all because of the negligence of the people in charge of the railway. They eat, drink, and play every day, squander the people's money, and play games at work. How can they be in the mood to work? You still want to hitch a ride with them and put your life in the hands of such people?" Su Jinfeng didn't know whether she had been watching too much news or too much TV drama recently. She even knew how to use idioms when she talked about things. Poplar Fruit was stunned by this long lecture. But how could it be Poplar Fruit's turn to care about national affairs? With such a big thing happening, the railway department must give the people an explanation. Didn't they see that the Prime Minister had already rushed to the scene? What Poplar Fruit had to do now was to appease the old lady's emotions. He said, "Mom, don't be angry. It's not that I don't listen to you. You see, recently, I've been staying at home all day to take care of Kiki. How can I have the chance to go outside and take the train? Right? I don't go anywhere to play." Su Jinfeng thought about it at this time. Her tone softened and she said, "It doesn't matter if you have or not. Anyway, you have to be careful. Let's not take such a dangerous train. It's not that fast. Go to the bus station and take 5 or 6 hours to get home." Yes, you're right," Poplar Fruit agreed. "By the way, what about the blind date last week? Tell me, how did it go wrong?" Su Jinfeng's tone changed. Poplar Fruit's head was about to explode. Why did they suddenly talk about his blind date? Poplar Fruit wailed in his heart. "Mom, I want to talk to you about current affairs and politics. Let's not change the topic so quickly, okay?" Poplar Fruit braced himself and briefly explained the situation to his mother. Then, with a bitter face, he was bombarded by his mother's views on marriage for half an hour. Poplar Fruit's history of struggle from childhood to adulthood gave him a wealth of experience in dealing with his mother. In this kind of situation, it was absolutely impossible to talk back to his mother. Debating with Su Jinfeng, who was a teacher, was definitely an act of suicide. The solution could be summed up in one word: delay. Delay until his mother's mouth was dry. Delay until his mother's heart was blooming with joy. Delay until his mother was willing to put down the phone. In any case, after putting down the phone, Poplar Fruit could completely forget about what his mother said. He was far away in Yangcheng. The sky was high, and the emperor was far away. His mother could no longer interfere with what he did. After hanging up the phone, Poplar Fruit collapsed on the sofa, as if he had been granted amnesty. He threw the hot phone far away. He was finally saved. Poplar Fruit turned his head to look at Kiki. He couldn't help but jump up again. "Kiki, why did you put your finger in your mouth again?" Poplar Fruit angrily pinched Kiki's little face. He pulled her right hand out again and held it down to prevent her from putting it back. No matter how unhappy Kiki was, Poplar Fruit refused to let go. In the afternoon, Poplar Fruit got out of bed and routinely logged on to the Ingyan website. He discovered that after a week, he had thought that there was no hope for the recruitment of translators for cult leader Qiao's biography. Poplar Fruit passed the first round of translation tests. Like the other 49 people who passed, he received an invitation for the second round of translation tests. Clap, clap, clap. Poplar Fruit pressed his knuckles together and pressed the button to accept the second round of translation tests, with a face full of fighting spirit. The page jumped to a new document page. The second round of translation test was for cult leader Qiao's biography author, Walter Isaacson. Another selection of works by Walter Isaacson. Of course, it wasn't his more famous and best-selling books that had already been translated into Chinese. The Ingyan website wasn't stupid enough to take out Kissinger's biography, Benjamin Franklin, and Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, An American's Life, Einstein, Life in the Universe, and other works for them to read. This selection came from an article that he published in one of the company's publications when he was the editor-in-chief of Time magazine. This publication wasn't popular in China, so naturally, not many people had read it. However, Poplar Fruit happened to be one of the few people who had read the original text. Some time ago, for this audition, after submitting the first round of translation, he searched for all of Isaacson's works on the internet. Poplar Fruit's original intention was to familiarize himself with Isaacson's writing style and some of his usual rhetorical techniques. He didn't expect to accidentally read this article on a website. Although Poplar Fruit only used English to understand the article, it didn't stop him from memorizing the entire article. When he saw this excerpt, Poplar Fruit immediately recalled the content of the full article. The next step was very simple. Poplar Fruit only needed to translate the understanding in his mind into Chinese, polish it a little, and the translation would be fresh out of the oven. It's not that difficult. Poplar Fruit thought as he sent the translation back. He raised his head and stretched lazily. Chapter 59. Turn it on, turn it on. Song Jiwen said excitedly. Wait, there's another line. Poplar Fruit shouted. Poplar Fruit's study now had 3 desks. One was his desk, one was his computer desk, and the new one was Song Jiwen's computer desk, which he had just bought today. Song Jiwen's busy work had finally come to an end. For the past month, he had been burning the midnight oil even when he got home from work. All kinds of boring text materials were driving him crazy. It wasn't until he got off work last night that he rushed to Poplar Fruit's house and cried, "I'm finally free." Originally, he thought that since they lived opposite each other, they could play games together at night. He didn't expect that after living here for more than a month, let alone play games together, he didn't even have time to play on the computer. Song Jiwen's battle axe had been hungry for a long time. As soon as he had some free time, he immediately ran to the home market to buy a computer desk and placed it in Poplar Fruit's study. Then, he moved the desktop that was specially used to play games over. Song Jiwen said righteously. From now on, this room will be our game room. Poplar Fruit's repeated protests were to no avail, so he had no choice but to change his sacred study. It wasn't a very big room to begin with. There were 3 bookshelves and 3 desks. Poplar Fruit felt that it was a bit crowded, but it was still acceptable. Anyway, as long as Song Jiwen didn't occupy his favorite windowsill, he didn't care about these details. Okay. Poplar Fruit clapped his hands and raised his head. Oh! Song Jiwen shouted as he pressed the power button. He sat in the comfortable ergonomic gaming chair and rubbed his palms. Help me turn it on. I'll wash my hands, Poplar Fruit said. He went to the kitchen sink to wash his hands. After thinking about it, he took out the plums he bought in the morning from the fridge, poured them all on a plate, and washed them. The plums he bought today looked good. They were plump and round without any scars. The skin was crystal clear and deep wine red. There were some water droplets on them, which made them look even more delicate. Old Gua, what are you doing? Hurry up, hurry up. Song Jiwen shouted impatiently. Coming, coming. What are you shouting for? Poplar Fruit carried a plate, a trash can and a tissue box in the living room. Poplar Fruit placed the trash can between the two, and then put a large plate of plums on the joint of the 2 desks. It immediately attracted Song Jiwen's eyes. What is it? Song Jiwen turned around. Wow! Plums! Why didn't you bring such delicious food here earlier? He immediately picked up a plum and took a bite. Oh, it's delicious! Song Jiwen said vaguely. The plum in his hand had been bitten open, and the juice on its surface was about to drip. Poplar Fruit quickly handed him a tissue and pointed at the trash can. Don't put it on the table. There's a trash can here. He also ate one. It was sweet and sour. It was delicious. No matter how delicious the fruit was, it couldn't stop the 2 from playing the game. Soon, Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen wiped their hands clean and entered the game. They were still in the 1st district of Shanghai. The 2 of them randomly picked a bomb room and entered it. The other modes were not as interesting as the bomb mode. Probably all the players who had played Counter-Strike would feel this way. The map was Power Station. There were no familiar IDs in the room. Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen were born in a lurker's home. In this map, lurkers were not easy to deal with. This was because if they didn't know how to cooperate, it was easy to create a situation where several people were squeezed in the middle lane and sniped at each other. Poplar Fruit didn't care about the others. He said to Song Jiwen, "We're not in a hurry. Let's take it slow. Let's see how our teammates play first." Song Jiwen nodded. He took his AK to the small bridge and tried to shoot at the enemy in the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion. Poplar Fruit used the sniper. As he had guessed, there were 3 snipers in the middle lane. Including Poplar Fruit, there were 8 lurkers. How could they play? There was no space in the middle lane. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to run to the small bridge. At this time, Song Jiwen was exchanging fire with the enemy in the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion at the junction of the 2nd building and the small bridge. Poplar Fruit dodged and fired. The enemy was hit in the chest and fell to the ground before they noticed. However, Poplar Fruit wasn't the first to kill an enemy. In the middle lane, they were the first to be attacked by the enemy. 3 snipers squeezed in the middle. The enemy's sniper in the middle lane could hit someone with a random shot. Soon they lost 2 people in a row. Poplar Fruit didn't have time to feel depressed. At this time, gunshots were heard in the middle lane. There was only one sentence left in his mind. There's someone in Avenue B. He didn't need to look. In his mind, he guessed the enemy's movements based on the casualties on his side. The first flash came from Avenue B. 1 or 2 people rushed out and killed the lurkers who were squatting on the clothesline above the sewer, and the 2 machine gunners near point B of the sewer. Then, they threw 2 grenades and killed the last lurker in the middle lane. In an instant the situation changed. There were only 3 lurkers left, and there were still 7 defenders. What should he do? Poplar Fruit was very decisive. He immediately left the first building and ran from the small bridge to the second building. Then he said to Song Jiwen, "Help me watch the people coming up the stairs." He sniped from the window of the second building. Sure enough, an enemy threw a flash from the stairs. However, it only landed on the second floor of the first building. It didn't affect Song Jiwen. When Song Jiwen saw the enemy appear, he clicked the mouse. The powerful firepower of his AK directly penetrated the wall of the stairs and turned the first enemy into a sieve. The people who were following behind quickly hid. As soon as Song Jiwen's gunfire stopped, Poplar Fruit saw a figure from the second-floor balcony. A defender wearing a black bulletproof vest only poked his head out of Poplar Fruit's scope before he was killed by Poplar Fruit. He probably wanted to throw a grenade from below to kill Song Jiwen. However, all of this was within Poplar Fruit's expectations. After killing this opponent, Poplar Fruit did not hesitate. He immediately turned his gun and aimed at the middle lane. Sure enough, an enemy from Avenue B crept out of the sewer and appeared with his back facing Poplar Fruit's scope. The last teammate, who was stuck in the side lane of the second building, did not let Poplar Fruit down. He killed the person who came out of point A. The situation changed dramatically once again. The original situation of 7 versus 3 defenders was reversed by Yang Guo and the others in less than 10 seconds. Now it was 2 versus 3. Go to point A or point B? Song Jiwen shouted. Go to point A. Poplar Fruit said. He judged that there should be at least 1 enemy on the way to point B. The terrain of point B was more complicated. For the lurkers who had the advantage, going to point A was a better choice. Okay. Under Poplar Fruit's cover, Song Jiwen picked up the C4 from the middle lane and called for his teammate. The 3 of them formed a triangle and surrounded point A. After passing through the middle lane, Poplar Fruit went to point A2. Song Jiwen went to point A1, and another teammate came out from the side lane. The first to fire was Song Jiwen, who was carrying a backpack. He was very smart and did not continue to fight to the death. He fired while dodging, drawing the enemy's line of fire. Then, his teammate who jumped out from the side lane successfully finished the job. After searching, Song Jiwen dropped the backpack. Poplar Fruit was stuck in the corner of the connecting point with a sniper. The last guardian did not take a detour. He directly rushed back from point B with a gun. In the end, he was killed by Poplar Fruit as soon as he poked his head out from point B. What's a reversal? This is a shocking reversal. Haha. A teammate on the lurker's side excitedly mocked in the public channel. As a result, a few people on the other side were not convinced and quarreled with him. Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen were not so excited. The 2 of them silently high-fived each other and prepared for the next round. In the previous round, Poplar Fruit could clearly see the strength of the opponent. Indeed, there was no one with good marksmanship. The opponent's sniper in the middle lane was okay, but it was only okay. Compared to Poplar Fruit, he was still not good enough. In the second round, the 2 original snipers on the lurker's side wisely gave up. Instead, they switched to machine guns and followed the rest to point A. As a sniper, Poplar Fruit did not run too far ahead. After the rest of the team rushed past, he ran to the bottom of the library. He turned around and aimed at the intersection between Avenue B and the lurker's house. Almost everyone was shooting at point A, but there was still 1 sniper on the lurker's house. He stubbornly stood at the slope of the lurker's house and looked at Poplar Fruit foolishly through his scope. This made Poplar Fruit a little speechless. There were 5 defenders guarding Point A. In the process of the charge, the lurkers also lost a lot of people. However, with the advantage of numbers, they took down Point A with 1 less person sacrificed. Of course, the defenders at Point B could not sit still. They rushed to Point A when the gunshots were heard. One of them wanted to flank the lurkers, but from the middle lane. He rushed out of Avenue B, and was shocked when he saw Poplar Fruit's teammate on the slope of the bandit's house. However, Poplar Fruit's teammate was also shocked. Not only was his first shot slow, but it also missed. The defender quickly moved, wanting to finish him off before Poplar Fruit's teammate's bullet could reach him. Before the defender's muzzle could adjust, he suddenly felt his body shake and slowly fell to the ground. Poplar Fruit calmly fired a shot and saved his cute teammate. 2 more left. Song Jiwen had already died. He looked at the view of his teammates on the screen and shouted, "There are 2 people at the connection point." Poplar Fruit did not hesitate. He immediately switched to a flash and threw it. He immediately switched back to the sniper rifle. As soon as the flash grenade exploded at Point A2, he flashed out from the middle lane. There was no one in the middle lane, so he jumped from the corner of the wall to Point A2. While he was in the air, he completed the 3 steps of scoping in, finding the enemy, and pulling the trigger. He killed one. The sniper rifle was still scoping in when a defender suddenly rushed out from the connection point. He was holding an M4A1 and was shooting at Poplar Fruit. The situation was extremely urgent. Poplar Fruit was shot in the foot and lost half of his health. He did not wait for the sniper rifle to return to its position. He decisively switched to the Desert Eagle and steadily fired a shot, hitting the defender right in the head. The defender fell on his back. His black muzzle spat out a string of flames along the wall and into the sky. Fortunately, there were no flying birds in this game. Otherwise, he might have been unlucky enough to be accidentally injured. After winning another game, the teammate who had been hooting earlier once again turned on the taunting mode and started to curse at the opponents. Poplar Fruit was helpless. He ignored them and focused on the game with Song Jiwen. This game was one-sided. Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen led the lurkers and slaughtered the defenders. However, at this time, the victory or defeat did not seem to be important. The entire game's limelight was stolen by the taunting battle between Poplar Fruit's teammate and the defenders. In the last round, the defenders who were labeled as AC Longyu said indignantly, "Arrogant my ass. If you have the guts, play a game with our team. Let's play. I'm not afraid of you." The teammate who had been taunting them for 100 years agreed. Chapter 60. Returning to the waiting screen, Poplar Fruit called out to Song Jiwen and said, "Mosquito, don't go. Let's continue playing. This kind of grudge game is the most interesting." Song Jiwen thought about it and understood. He smiled and said, "That's right. It's best if a few experts come." Soon a lot of irrelevant people left their rooms. The teammate PS Frog, who had turned on the taunting mode, was very excited when he saw that Condor Hero and Spear Hero, who had played the best in the previous game, had stayed. He shouted at the other team in the room, warning them not to kick him out. "Who kicked people out? You can call anyone you want. Do you think we're afraid?" The other team replied coldly. AC Dragon changed to a new map, Desert Ash. This map was transplanted from Counter-Strike's Dust 2, so Poplar Fruit was very familiar with it. The scale of the battle changed to 5v5, with 7 rounds per round. They probably called for people in the team chat. Soon, a few people were replaced, and a few unfamiliar IDs came in. There were 3 people who stayed in Poplar Fruit's room. PS Frog called another teammate, PS Fleeting Years. But the last empty seat was still empty. Every time someone came in, they would be scared away when they saw the same team IDs. After waiting for 2 minutes, Poplar Fruit's mouth was full of juice from eating plums. Finally, a person with the ID Big Dragon came in and did not leave. The game started. Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen quickly wiped their hands, turned their heads and prepared for battle. After the map was read, Poplar Fruit and the others appeared on the lurker side. This time, only Poplar Fruit used a sniper rifle. P.S. Fleeting Years was not sure if P.S. Frog had told him that he used an M4A1. Big Dragon, on the other hand, was using a shotgun. This kind of gun was often seen in random games. He ran to the staircase of Cave B to ambush someone. Poplar Fruit had just started the game, and like most of the other players, he aimed his sniper rifle at the center door from the slope of the lurker's house. Suddenly, a figure flashed past. Poplar Fruit instinctively fired a shot, but he hit nothing. Poplar Fruit dodged to the side. Immediately, a bullet brushed past his shoulder and hit the wall behind him. Poplar Fruit frowned and shook his head. This shot was useless. The halftime break was too long, and his hands were a little cold. He gathered his spirit and seriously dealt with the enemy sniper in front of him. The middle gate was a process of taking the initiative. If one could control the middle gate first, they would be able to shoot before the other party. Then, the one who would fall would most likely be the enemy. Poplar Fruit had now lost the initiative because of his carelessness. Without looking, Poplar Fruit knew that the other party had already stood firm and was waiting for him with a sniper rifle. Knowing that there was a tiger in the mountain, he still walked towards it. As a sniper, Poplar Fruit maintained absolute confidence in his own strength. So what if you have the initiative? I'm still going to kill you, Poplar Fruit thought to himself. At this time, Song Jiwen and the two PS players tried to attack University A, but the two opponents were indeed from the same team. They cooperated very well, and with high explosive and flash, Song Jiwen's team lost a player and fled in a sorry state. Poplar Fruit gently revealed half of his body, and then immediately dodged back. The enemy's bullets came as expected, but Poplar Fruit did not stop. He jumped out, and the moment he landed, he scoped in and pulled the trigger. Before the enemy could dodge, he sniped him. Well done, Song Jiwen shouted. The frustration of being trapped in room A by grenades and random gunfire suddenly disappeared. Poplar Fruit smiled slightly and said to Song Jiwen, "You guys go from path A, I'll watch gate A. You guys go from path A or path B according to the situation." Before he finished speaking, on the right side of the screen, it showed that Great Dragon, who was hiding near the stairs of hole B, had killed a defender who had peeked out from point B. The advantage suddenly came. "Break through the middle and hit path B," Song Jiwen said decisively. Poplar Fruit agreed, but he did not move with the rest of the team. He jumped to point L in the middle, hit half of his body, and aimed his sniper rifle at path A. He guessed that the two defenders at point A would split up, and one of them would jump from path A to hole B and go around to point B. The enemy only had one defender left at point B. PS Fleeting Years entered point B from dog B in the middle, while Song Jiwen went up from hole B and rushed to point B. Although they had never worked together before, the two of them relied on their little bit of tacit understanding to disarm the enemy at point B. This time Poplar Fruit guessed wrongly. The enemy did not come out from path A, but from gate A. As soon as he came out, he noticed Poplar Fruit's figure, and immediately turned his gun to fire at him. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit caught a glimpse of a shadow from the corner of his eye. Before the enemy's bullets could reach him, he quickly hid in the fishbowl path under the slope of the lurker, and began to lead the enemy in circles. This was a psychological game. Poplar Fruit was very cunning. He had no intention of killing the enemy himself, and using his M4A1 to fight at close range. After fooling the enemy for a while, he jumped up the slope and ran toward the back garden of point B. At this time, Big Dragon had unknowingly run behind the middle gate. A defender carefully ran from point A to the defender's spawn point. Then, he raised his gun and watched as Dogby walked forward quietly. He just happened to fall into Big Dragon's trap and was killed with 2 shots. "Fuck, you have a shady dog," the enemy complained on the public channel. Big Dragon did not respond, but PS Frog was not to be outdone and immediately started arguing with the enemy. There was only one player left on the enemy's side. The defender played very carefully. Although he managed to stay alive, he did not do anything until the C4 exploded. When the second round began, Poplar Fruit knew that it was going to be a one-sided battle. This time he found his rhythm. At the middle gate, he only used 2 bullets to take out the enemy's sniper. The enemy who wanted to jump over to defend point B was also killed. After losing 2 players at the beginning of the game, the enemy could no longer form an effective defense. The weak defense line at point B was immediately broken into pieces by Song Jiwen and the others. After winning all 7 rounds, Poplar Fruit and the others had once again cleanly taken down the enemy. However, the results of the lurkers surprised Poplar Fruit. He was in first place, but the second place was actually Big Dragon, who had been sneakily shooting at their opponents the entire game. The others, including Song Jiwen, had only killed a few enemies. The results were divided between Poplar Fruit and Big Dragon. PS Frog happily continued to mock the enemy, saying that the enemy's team was trash, and that they could not even beat a random team. The enemy was unconvinced and said, "Fuck, what's the big deal if you can beat us? If you have the guts, fight with our main force. If you don't dare to fight, then don't talk nonsense." For the first time, Poplar Fruit typed in the public channel, "Call your main force over." Yangguo's words immediately ignited the passion of both sides. Even Great Dragon, who had been silent all this time, was a little excited and shouted, "That's right. Let's see who's good." Under such provocation, the members of AC Dragon could not take it lying down. They called their team's experts one after another. Their IDs all started with the letters AC. After seeing the opponent's IDs, even PS Frog could not remain calm. He typed in the team channel, "Fuck, we've gone too far this time." PS Fleeting Time also typed, "AC Fox, the sniper god of our district's amateur league last year. There's also AC Akatsuki and AC Labyrinth. They're all AC team's main force. They think too highly of us," said PS Frog. 3 gods, 2 experts. Song Jiwen did not understand, but he asked, "Are they really that good?" He and Poplar Fruit did not care about the game's information, so they had never heard of these people. "Of course they're good," PS Frog said excitedly. AC team was the runner-up of the Shanghai District 1 Amateur League last year. All 3 of their players are here. What do you think? Not to mention a god like Fox. Some people say that even professional teams may not be as good as him. "They're not as scary as you say," said Big Dragon, who had been watching from the sidelines. AC team is only at the amateur level, but their cooperation is still a little good. Fox's strength is not to be underestimated, but he's still a little lacking compared to the experts of professional teams. What's there to be afraid of? It's just a game. It's rare to have a match like this, so there's no need to worry too much about winning or losing," Poplar Fruit concluded. "Okay, then let's fight it out with them," said PS Frog, who was the most easily excited. PS Fleeting Time also shouted, and everyone's enthusiasm was aroused. Before the game started, Poplar Fruit smiled and typed, "Big Dragon, are you still going to use a shotgun later?" Big Dragon replied, "Why would I? It's such a big event. Of course I wouldn't dare to play casually." "Then I'm relieved," said the talkative PS Frog. He stole what Poplar Fruit wanted to say. "What are you going to use later?" "I'll use an AK. The Condor heroes are very good at sniping, so I won't embarrass myself, haha." "Are you guys on Crooked?" PS Fleeting Time asked. "I think it's more convenient for everyone to communicate in the same channel, so let's report something." Under his organization, Poplar Fruit and the others went on Crooked and entered the channel that PS Fleeting Time had temporarily opened. After going on Crooked, Poplar Fruit heard the voices of PS Frog and PS Fleeting Time. It sounded like they were underage children, so it was no wonder they were so easily excited. Big Dragon had a more mature voice, and it sounded a little magnetic. After a while, the 2 sides discussed the strategy for this grudge match, 5v5. In the first half, AC Long Yu would be the lurker, and in the second half, it would be Poplar Fruit's turn. There would be 5 matches in each half, and the map was still the same Desert Ash. Without further ado, they entered the game. When the countdown ended, Poplar Fruit took the lead and went to the middle lane to snipe at AC Fox. Perhaps it was because Yangguo wasn't used to the change from a lurker to a defender. He made a mistake and didn't stand in the right position. Before he could open his scope, a bullet pierced through the door and into his body. "Fuck, bad start," Poplar Fruit thought gloomily, Song Jiwen was also careless, and when he jumped over the middle gate, he was sniped by AC Fox. The first round was the same as the second round of the previous round, but this time it was Poplar Fruit's team that was unlucky. PS Frog called out in crooked, "Big Brother Condor, why don't we smoke the middle lane? Fox sniping is too hard to deal with." "No need, trust me," Poplar Fruit said confidently. "When enemies meet on a narrow path, the brave will win." If he backed down and did not dare to fight AC Fox, then he would have to back down again and again when he faced the other strong players of AC Long Live. Yonggwa tightened his grip on the mouse as he looked at the screen confidently and said in his heart, "Victory will start with me." Chapter 61. In the desert town, the houses and the ground were almost all grayish-yellow like sand. Even the sky looked so lonely. In a world without wind, it was so dull that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard clearly. However, the deathly silence at this moment was just the prelude to the explosion of a hail of bullets. 5, 4, 3. As the countdown on the screen flashed, Poplar Fruit's breathing became a little rapid. 1. The battle was about to start. Song Jiwen's spawn point was closer to point B, so he took the lead and jumped over first. Poplar Fruit didn't run behind him. Instead, he took a few steps back in the direction of the big crate and went up a small slope. Taking a deep breath, Poplar Fruit counted in his mind. 1, 2, 3. He dashed out and pulled the trigger. The scope opened and disappeared at a speed invisible to the naked eye. It was such a quick scope that Fox didn't even have half a second to react. The top of the screen showed that Hero Condor had killed AC Fox with a sniper rifle. Poplar Fruit breathed a sigh of relief and smiled slightly. The confidence on his face was even stronger. The two PS players' cheers came through the earpiece. They were yelling and shouting, extremely happy. But at this moment, Song Jiwen yelled into the microphone, "Stop messing around. There are 4 people at point B." The opponent was currently attacking point B with all their strength. Fox's death was a huge shock to them. For a moment they were in a mess. 3 of them were seriously injured by Song Jiwen's grenade. However, Song Jiwen couldn't block the opponent's random gunfire. He was taken away by the opponent through the crate. Poplar Fruit didn't even think about it. He threw a high-explosive grenade outside point B. It exploded in the crowd, and 2 lurkers were blown away. 2 more, Song Jiwen shouted. The 2 PS players came to the rescue. Poplar Fruit retreated to the spawn point of the defenders and aimed at Boss B from afar. On the other hand, Great Dragon jumped down from Path A and killed a lurker who wanted to rush out from the middle. The remaining heavily injured lurker didn't even have time to unpack his backpack before he was quickly killed by the 2 PS players. After winning this round, the defenders' morale was greatly boosted. The third round began with the match between Poplar Fruit and Fox. Ever since he was caught off guard by Poplar Fruit in the last round, Fox became more vigilant. He no longer stood still and covered the middle lane. Instead, he began to move around randomly. Poplar Fruit was also well versed in this. He moved behind the center door and took advantage of the opening to fire. However, Fox was an expert sniper, and Poplar Fruit's reaction speed was extremely fast. The 2 fired a few shots at each other, but all of them missed. For a moment, Fox had no choice but to continue dealing with Poplar Fruit. Just because he couldn't do anything, it didn't mean that Poplar Fruit couldn't do anything to him. Poplar Fruit smiled in his heart. "You want an opening, right? Then I'll give you one." After the next shot, Poplar Fruit didn't immediately dodge after switching weapons like before. Instead, he paused on the spot. When Fox saw this, he thought that Poplar Fruit committed the biggest taboo of a sniper, standing on the spot and waiting for the scope to open again. He didn't hesitate at all. He immediately stopped and opened fire with his blink mirror. Just as he opened his blink mirror for a fraction of a second, he realized that Poplar Fruit, who should have been in his field of vision, had disappeared. A few words flashed in his heart. "I fell into a trap. That's right." Poplar Fruit only stood on the spot for less than a second before he moved sideways. The moment Fox pulled the trigger, Poplar Fruit also stood outside of his scope and opened fire. Fox didn't have time to pull back his gun to dodge. He only felt his body shake. He was shot. Who is it? He's so strong. In a rented apartment in Magic City, a young man in his early 20s took off his headphones. He looked at the darkened screen in disbelief. He clicked on the tab to look at his opponent. An unknown ID? After this round, the opponent lost another member and couldn't complete a comeback. In the end, the defenders stubbornly defended. In this battle, Poplar Fruit killed 2 people with his sniper rifle. Song Jiwen killed 1, Big Dragon killed 1, and PS Frog killed 1. It was 2-1 now. They went from being behind to overtaking. The defenders' morale was high. In the 4th round, Poplar Fruit was jumping around the middle door. However, he didn't see Fox come out to snipe him. Scared, Poplar Fruit laughed in his heart. Of course Fox wasn't scared. After playing with sniper rifles to his level, he wouldn't have the word scared in his heart. However, as a sniper in an amateur team who had played in competitions, he understood that this wasn't the time for one person to show off. After all, CF was still a team game. Under his command, the lurkers carried 3 and 2 of A's while he, AC Akatsuki, and AC Maze, the 3 best shooters in Flash Smoke, rushed out from A's door. The 2 PS Frog players couldn't block them at all. They were killed before they even saw anyone. There were still 2 players from AC team, holding back Big Dragon on the platform. Fox fired a shot from afar and finished him off. The last defender at A's door was cleared. AC Akatsuki ran towards A's platform first. Poplar Fruit wouldn't let him pass so easily. Even though AC Akatsuki jumped and changed speed, Poplar Fruit only flicked his mouse and fired before the crosshair on the screen was even aimed at him. The bullet flew out and AC Akatsuki, who had jumped into the air, fell to the ground. Yang was aiming at where he was going to make his next move. Fox realized that something was wrong and hurriedly called for his teammates to smoke up. White smoke filled the entire A's platform. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to let them pass. At this time, Song Jiwen, who had just walked out of B's entrance, had bad news. He had just revealed his foot and was killed by a lurker waiting on the side path. After entering the encirclement, Poplar Fruit had a 1v4. Even though he bravely killed a lurker who jumped down from the middle lane, he couldn't escape from Fox's soul-chasing sniper. 2-2, it was a tie again. This time, Poplar Fruit and the others saw the coordination of the team that had taken second place in the amateur league. PS Frog still described the scene of them being broken through with fear. 2 flashes flew out at the same time. One exploded on A's platform, while the other exploded above WC. He, who was crouching at WC, and PS Fleeting Time, who was crossing defense with him on A's platform, were blinded by the flashes. Before they could see the enemy, they were finished off by AC Akatsuki and AC Maze. The opponent's coordination was good, so it wasn't suitable for them to defend at the front. Poplar Fruit thought for a moment and had them change their formation again. One person would stand at A's entrance. If someone rushed in, he would throw a grenade and then retreat. One person would stand at A's platform and A's slope. They could watch the side paths and support A's main road. But this time, Team AC didn't follow the strategy they used so well last time. They threw 2 grenades from A's side to feign an attack. Then, they used a 3v2 formation to surround B's point. Poplar Fruit, who was caught off guard, finished off one person, but he was still shot full of holes by the lurkers who rushed up from behind. Song Jiwen couldn't hold on either, and was quickly wiped out. This round, the defenders lost again. After losing 2 rounds in a row, PS Frog started to feel a little nervous. Poplar Fruit encouraged him, and then had his teammates change their positions again. He had Big Dragon, who had better marksmanship, stand at A's position, so that he could provide support at any time. After being rushed by Team AC for 2 rounds in a row, Poplar Fruit was a little unhappy. He waited for the countdown to end, and then jumped to the right of the middle gate. He stood on B's slope and aimed his gun at A's small path. Since you like to walk A's small path so much, I'll let you understand. Poplar Fruit stared at the small path's entrance. 1. Poplar Fruit saw a figure appear and swung his mouse. With a bang, the enemy fell to the ground. 2. Poplar Fruit counted silently. The second lurker appeared in his field of vision, and was about to sweep over with his AK. But Poplar Fruit's gun was faster. After he pulled the trigger, Poplar Fruit put away his gun and changed to a high-explosive grenade. He rushed into B's gate and threw it into B's hole. Fuck! Seeing a black object flying towards him, Fox quickly swung his knife and jumped back. But it was too late. The high-explosive grenade exploded beside him. He, who had already been shot a few times by Song Jiwen's AK, was blown away. The score of both sides was tied again. Team AC, who was ranked second among the amateur teams in Shanghai District 1, didn't expect that a grudge match that they thought was just some passers-by's provocation would end up in such a stalemate. Fox gritted his teeth and gave his teammates a new strategy through his headset. A new round began. Poplar Fruit realized in the middle lane that the middle gate had been completely blocked by 2 smoke grenades. He looked out from the middle gate. It was all white, and he couldn't see anyone at all. At this time, concentrated gunshots came from A's small path. They had actually rushed out of A's small path with a smoke grenade. This time, AC Akatsuki and AC Maze were mainly attacking the small path. A's small path wasn't peaceful either. The PS Frog in A's small path was already calling for help. He couldn't hold on much longer. Not good. Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth and ordered his teammates to try their best to stall for more time. Then, Poplar Fruit let Song Jiwen switch to the middle lane. He hurriedly went around B's small path. Just as he ran into B's small path, A's small path was officially breached. The opponent had actually taken down A's small path without losing a single person. Song Jiwen ran out from the middle gate. Just as he passed through the smoke, his body suddenly shook and he fell on his back. He grabbed his headset and shouted at Poplar Fruit, "They still have a sniper in their house." Poplar Fruit's eyes widened. He ran from B's small path to the lurker's back garden. He didn't dare to leave any footsteps behind. He crouched and jumped all the way. Just as he went up the slope, Poplar Fruit caught a glimpse of a person in front of him. He quickly crouched down. With a swoosh, a bullet flew over his head. As expected of the amateur sniper god in Shanghai's 1st District, Fox, he actually realized that Poplar Fruit was flanking him. At this time, the wails of PS Frog could be heard from Poplar Fruit's headset. He was the last remaining teammate at A's small path. Although he hid in the toilet and stubbornly resisted, he still couldn't escape the fate of being annihilated. "Shut up," Song Jiwen shouted in his headset. At this time, Poplar Fruit was at his most dangerous moment. After seeing this, his teammates all held their breaths, not daring to affect Poplar Fruit's judgment. Poplar Fruit didn't hide like a coward. At this time, he should be the one who was anxious. He couldn't be held back by Fox any longer. He suddenly flashed out from behind the wall of the slope. A series of picturesque, yet extremely strange movements. Not only did Fox miss his first shot, but his Desert Eagle also missed Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit wouldn't give him another chance. He suddenly stopped and raised his gun. With a flash of the scope and a pull of the trigger, Fox was sent flying by the powerful firepower of the sniper rifle. Poplar Fruit didn't have time to appreciate the results of his battle. He spread his legs and rushed to A's door. Over at the lurker's side, Fox yelled at his teammates, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take cover. Look at the small path. No, we have to split up to look at A's door too." Poplar Fruit had just stepped into A's door when he received a notification. They had taken cover. There were still 45 seconds before the explosion, but Poplar Fruit needed 5 seconds to dismantle it. Therefore, there were only 30 seconds left for Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit didn't hesitate. He threw out a flash and jumped out decisively. The afterglow of the flash hadn't dissipated yet, and even he was dazzled for a moment. Poplar Fruit fired before he landed, taking out an enemy guarding the door on A's Avenue. Countdown 40 seconds. Hurry up, Poplar Fruit roared in his heart. At this moment, it was as if he was possessed by a god. He had just jumped from the side of the wall into A's Avenue. In the air, he used a flash snipe. AC Labyrinth didn't even see him clearly before he was shot. Countdown 36 seconds. Is this guy cheating? AC Labyrinth shouted in their headset. Fox said angrily, "Don't shoot at each other. We still have 2 people. Don't be afraid." We'll drag it out until he dies. This was the difference between an amateur team that had played in a competition and a random team. They didn't care about individual results and only pursued the final result. AC Akatsuki and his other teammate obediently hid behind the crates on A's platform and behind the small staircase. They were cowards. As a sniper, Poplar Fruit really couldn't do anything to them. He didn't dare to cross Company A's platform because he would be shot down by their crossfire. Even if he was a god, he wouldn't be able to use a sniper rifle to deal with two enemies on his left and right at the same time. What to do? Time passed second by second. There were only 23 seconds left. He couldn't hesitate. Poplar Fruit took out a high explosive, bit off the tab, and threw it towards AC Akatsuki's hiding place on A's platform. AC Akatsuki saw the bomb flying towards him and instinctively jumped to the side. In his headset, Fox yelled bitterly, "Don't! I've been waiting for you to come out." Poplar Fruit's gun barrel drifted and chased after AC Akatsuki's half-exposed body like a shadow. He silently said, "Goodbye." AC Akatsuki fell. Countdown, 15 seconds. Poplar Fruit didn't hesitate. He jumped onto the platform, took out the last item, and threw it towards the small staircase. The staircase immediately filled with smoke. Countdown, 11 seconds. Poplar Fruit immediately crouched down and pressed the unpack button. The two teams who were closely watching the battle could clearly hear the sound of unpacking coming from their headsets. "Wait!" Fox yelled in his headset. He wished he could switch places with him right now. The last lurker crouched down in the smoke for 2 seconds. He couldn't hold it in anymore and yelled, "No! I've already unpacked." After saying that, he ran out of the smoke. But what greeted him was a huge bullet. Even though Poplar Fruit was unpacking, his eyes were focused on the smoke. The moment he saw a gun barrel sticking out, he immediately stopped what he was doing and took a shot with his sniper rifle. The lurkers were wiped out. Countdown, 7 seconds. Poplar Fruit crouched down and started unpacking again. He smiled slightly. He had a pair of pliers. 7 seconds was enough. In this battle, Poplar Fruit had single-handedly wiped out the 5 members of AC team and unpacked them at the last second. With such a result, no one could remain calm. Even Big Dragon, who hadn't spoken much all this time, couldn't suppress his excitement. He cheered and howled along with everyone else. After this battle, AC team's morale had completely plummeted. Indeed, having the tables turned was a huge blow to their morale. In the next few rounds, Poplar Fruit's team won. In the end, they didn't even fight in the second half and ran away with their tails between their legs. After this grudge match, Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen logged out of the game and went back to sleep. Poplar Fruit slept soundly. He didn't know that this match had caused a huge commotion among the amateur and professional players in Frontline. But this was all in the future. Chapter 62. The blazing sun scorched the earth, but there was no crowd on the spacious sidewalk. There were only groups of 2 or 3, holding umbrellas and sweating profusely as they walked quickly on the white bricks, or wiping the sweat from their foreheads and hiding in the shadow of the bus stop, hoping that the bus that was like a big iron can would arrive soon. Although it was still not easy to squeeze like sardines after getting on the bus, at least there was a cool breeze blowing on the bus. A taxi drove over and stopped at the side of the road. Poplar Fruit opened the door, opened the umbrella, and carried Kiki out. The driver opened the front window near the side of the road and pointed outside to Poplar Fruit, saying, "Just go down this road." Poplar Fruit looked and smiled. "Okay, thank you, sir." He pulled out the folded baby trolley from the car and then locked the door. The taxi drove away, and Poplar Fruit opened the baby trolley with the umbrella. After carrying Kiki inside, he pulled down the roof, like a big lid covering the whole car. At this time, Poplar Fruit pushed the trolley down the road with satisfaction. After walking a few dozen meters into the small road, Poplar Fruit was surprised to find that it was a new world. On the bluestone steps and ordinary alleys, although there was no gurgling water or beautiful women holding oil paper umbrellas, there were towering trees in every courtyard. The canopies of the trees were like imperial canopies, blocking the sun and leaving behind a cool breeze. The rich greenery and mottled spots of light intertwined to form a quiet and elegant picture. Most of the people walking here were old, but they still looked dignified and well-dressed. Some of them seemed to be good friends for many years, and when they met on the road, they warmly greeted each other. Some of them walked slowly, but with a happy expression, not anxious at all. This was a small alley that was different from the fast-paced metropolis of Yangcheng. For such a leisurely and elegant place, Yanghua felt as if she had transmigrated to the Jiangnan water town filled with a scholarly atmosphere. But if he listened carefully, the unique charm of Cantonese and the rhythm of Jiangnan's Wunong dialect was completely absent. Only at this time could Poplar Fruit be sure that he was not lost. 200 meters forward, Poplar Fruit saw his destination this time, Muda Tea House. The tea house was decorated in an antique style, and it was entirely made of wood. Even the plaque was written with 4 traditional Chinese characters, Muda Liuxiang. From afar, there were some old traces of smoke and fire, and it seemed to be quite old. Poplar Fruit, who had read a lot of books, had some understanding of the 2 words Mudu. Mudu was the name of an ancient town. At the end of the spring and autumn period, King Fuchai of Wu, in order to win the favor of beauty Shishir, deliberately built a large number of buildings on Lingyan Mountain. Wood was transported from all directions, and the river port at the foot of the mountain was blocked. Therefore there was the illusion of Block Mudu, and the name of the town came from that. Poplar Fruit guessed that the 2 words Liuxiang should be related to beauty Shishir. Did it mean that when the tea was opened, the beauty would leave a fragrance? Using this name, perhaps the owner of the tea house had some relationship with the ancient town that was the most beautiful in Jiangnan. The steps were made of square stones and decorated with soft moss. Although it was a little wet, it did not make people feel that it was slippery. The old men who came from all directions lifted their trousers and walked up the 8 steps with small, light steps. They were all smiling, as if they had returned to their hometown. Poplar Fruit picked up Kiki and carried the baby stroller with one hand. He walked up the steps, put her back in the stroller, and pushed her into the tea house. Just as he crossed the threshold, a waiter, no, it should be called a waiter here, greeted him with a smile. He was wearing a green robe, with a towel on his shoulder. He bent down and stretched out his hand to greet him. "Sir, please come in." Poplar Fruit nodded. As he walked forward, he secretly praised the service of this tea house. He asked, "Sir, how many people are there? Did you reserve a table in advance?" "I'm looking for Mr. Yao Dehua. Has he arrived yet?" Poplar Fruit said. Today he came to the tea house not because Lu Suqin had arranged a blind date for him, but because Yao Dehua, the vice president of Xinda Company, had called him to talk about something. Poplar Fruit felt that this matter was very fresh. He originally thought that Xinda Company would always be hidden behind the internet, and only be a platform for translators and mercenaries to issue tasks. Since the boss of the place where he earned money sincerely invited him, Poplar Fruit also readily agreed. So today's trip was made. "Mr. Yao has arrived. Sir, please follow me." The waiter smiled and led the way in front. On the second floor, near the railing, a middle-aged fat man with a Mediterranean hairstyle saw them. He stood up with a smile and stretched out his hand to Poplar Fruit, saying, "You must be Mr. Yang from Poplar Fruit. Hello, I'm Yao Dehua." President Yao, hello. Although he didn't know the purpose of Yao Dehua's visit, Poplar Fruit's first impression of Yao Dehua was still good. As the vice president of a big company, it was rare for him to be so polite. Poplar Fruit also smiled and walked forward to shake hands with him. Yao Dehua invited Poplar Fruit to sit down and ordered tea and snacks from the waiter. After sending the waiter away, he smiled at Poplar Fruit and said, "Mr. Yang, I guess you must be very confused as to why I invited you to come out and meet me?" Poplar Fruit nodded. "Before that, I want to briefly introduce myself to you," Yao Dehua said. "You should know my position. I'm currently the vice president of Xinda Group, and the president is my brother. Xinda Group can be said to be a family business, and I also have a certain amount of shares in the company. Xinda's translation market can be said to be opened up by me, and I've also been managing it for the past few years. And after more than 10 years of development, We are preparing to establish Xinda Translation Company in the second half of this year as an independent subsidiary of Xinda Group. In the future, the translation market will be handed over to Xinda Translation Company. Xinda Group will no longer interfere with the management and strategy of the new company, and I will also become the president of the new company. Poplar Fruit looked at him in confusion. Why is he telling me this? Poplar Fruit could only smile and say, "Congratulations, Mr. Yao." Haha, don't think that what I said has nothing to do with you. Yao Dehua laughed, and he briefly explained to Poplar Fruit that Poplar Fruit came out of nowhere to help him complete the military order. Because of Poplar Fruit, he won time to expand the translation market outside of Guangdong province. Poplar Fruit indeed played a big role in the successful establishment of Xinda Translation Company. Poplar Fruit asked strangely, "Mr. Yao, you didn't come here specifically to thank me, right? I really can't accept this. To be able to help you, it can only be said that it was unintentional. But you don't know at that time. If it weren't for you finding a place to make money, both of us would have run out of ammunition and food. Speaking of which, we still have to thank you. Mr. Yang, you are really worthy of your background in foreign trade. You have a glib tongue. Since that's the case, there's no need to talk about gratitude. I will remember this kindness in my heart. Haha. We can be considered to be fated. Let's have a drink and try the tea of this tea house. This is a wonderful place that even the people of Luoyang City might not know about." Yao Dehua laughed. Poplar Fruit picked up the teacup and drank a mouthful of tea. When it entered his mouth, he felt a rich fragrance. The tea was sweet and refreshing. It was indeed a treasure that couldn't be drunk in an ordinary club. No wonder a big boss like Yao Dehua would choose this place to meet him. "It's really good. This tea, is it Bilyuakun?" Poplar Fruit said in surprise. Haha, so Mr. Yang is also someone who understands tea. You can taste it with just a sip. That's right, this is the authentic Dongting Bilyuakun. Even the water used to make this tea was collected from a spring on Baiyun Mountain in the morning. Yao Dehua was happy to meet a bosom friend. He introduced the tea to Poplar Fruit in detail. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Mr. Yao, since we are so congenial, you don't have to call me Mr. Yang. Just call me Poplar Fruit or Little Yang." "Alright, then I will call you Little Yang. You don't have to call me Mr. Yao. How distant is that? Just call me Big Brother Yao." Yao Dehua laughed. "Big Brother Yao." Poplar Fruit responded, "Since you called me Big Brother Yao, I won't beat around the bush with you. I also like to speak straightforwardly. This time, I came here mainly to invite you to join my new company." Yao Dehua said straightforwardly. In fact, Yao Dehua had the idea of inviting Poplar Fruit to join a long time ago. However, at that time, he had been busy with the market outside of Guangdong province. The company's several gold medal interpreters were enough, so it was temporarily put aside. In the past few weeks, he had already arranged the entire chessboard. All that was left was the final activation and the cruel competition in the market. At this time, he received a report from the translation department. Poplar Fruit, who was currently the company's strongest gold medal interpreter, had a new situation. He actually started the task of translating French and German. Most of the people who learned languages could master more than one foreign language. The same was true for several gold medal interpreters in the translation department. In addition to English, they also mastered other languages. However, there were specializations in the industry. This sentence was not wrong. Except for Wu Ping's, the level of the other people's second foreign language could only reach the silver medal level. Therefore, in the translation department, there were also gold medal interpreters in charge of each small language. However, there were relatively few talents in the small language field. According to the feedback of the gold medal interpreters who reviewed Poplar Fruit, they actually expressed admiration for Poplar Fruit's translation. It could be seen that Poplar Fruit's level in French and German was also excellent, not only in the field of English, but also in the field of two small languages, but also at such a young age. Yao Dehua was almost destined to become a grandmaster in the future. How could Yao Dehua still sit on the fishing platform calmly? Even if he was rich, Yao Dehua was willing to put down his status to make friends with Yang Gua. Of course, it would be even better if he could recruit Yang Guo under his wing before the master grew up. Yao Dehua's offer to Poplar Fruit was also very generous. The position of deputy manager of the translation department of the new company, in charge of all the interpreters in the small language field, with an annual salary of 600,000 yuan. It should be understood that the annual salary mentioned here was paid by the company. The money that Poplar Fruit earned from doing tasks was not included in the annual salary. In other words, as long as Poplar Fruit did the daily management work, and sometimes the gold medal interpreter review and training work, he could use his working hours to earn more money. Yao Dehua also explained to Poplar Fruit that the reason why he only gave Wu Ping's the position of deputy manager was mainly because of Wu Ping's seniority in the company. Poplar Fruit had just come in, so Yao Dehua could not give him a higher position than Wu Ping's. However, he promised that if Poplar Fruit could make greater contributions in the rapid development of the company, he would definitely become the head of the translation department in the future. After saying what needed to be said, Yao Dehua looked at Poplar Fruit expectantly. His eyes were filled with nervousness and expectation. He held the cup of tea in his hand for a long time. The tea was cold, but he had no intention of drinking it. Chapter 63. The temptation of this offer was really great. Whether it was status, salary, or development prospects, it greatly exceeded Poplar Fruit's expectations. So Poplar Fruit hesitated for a long time. But after thinking about it, Poplar Fruit shook his head. In fact, for the poor Poplar Fruit in the past, it was impossible for him to refuse such a great opportunity. But now it was different. Poplar Fruit was a young stay-at-home father. And after spending more than 3 months with Kiki, he found that even a dream job could not sway his decision to accompany his daughter to grow up healthily and happily. Moreover, Poplar Fruit also liked the current freedom. He did not need others to tell him what to do. He could do what he wanted to do, and he could have the time to learn new knowledge. This kind of life was plain but happy, simple but fulfilling. Even if Poplar Fruit was offered 1,000 taels of gold, he would not be willing to exchange it for it. Is the salary not high enough? Yao Dehua asked anxiously. Seeing Yao Dehua's somewhat depressed expression, Poplar Fruit explained to him. No, brother Yao. The salary you give me is already very good. I refuse not because of the salary. You may not know, but I am currently raising my daughter alone, and I have no time to work. This is also the reason why I resigned from my previous foreign trade company. Poplar Fruit briefly introduced his current living situation to Yao Dehua. Besides, Poplar Fruit laughed. Brother Yao, you think too highly of me, but I don't think I am a management talent. If you give me a department to manage, I don't know where to start. Poplar Fruit's honesty eased Yao Dehua's expression. He poured himself and Poplar Fruit some hot tea and smiled. No one is born a management talent. This is all slowly cultivated. But little Yang, since you said so, I won't force you. Haha. Come, have some tea. Yao Dehua excitedly pushed a basket of pastries in front of Poplar Fruit and said, Try the barbecued pork buns here. You can't find anything more authentic in Yangcheng. Poplar Fruit picked one up and took a bite. His eyes lit up as he gave a thumbs up and said, Delicious. Although he didn't know what was authentic, this roast pork bun was indeed much more delicious than the ones he had eaten before. The dough was warm and soft, and the filling was rich and fragrant. Yao Dehua smiled. Eat more if you like. The two of them then talked about Yao Dehua's idea of being a mercenary. Poplar Fruit was very appreciative of this way of doing business. His words struck a chord with Yao Dehua, and Yao Dehua was even happier. It was rare for Yao Dehua to meet such a good listener, so he began to talk to Poplar Fruit about his struggles over the years. Yao Dehua's story could be written into an inspirational novel. He was born into a family of translators, and his family had a company. The person who made the company the #1 in Guangdong province was his brother. When he was young, Yao Dehua grew up under his brother's shadow. Every day, he would hear praises for his brother. Even in the company, he had to bow down to his brother. More than a decade ago, Cinda Company wanted to open up the translation market, and Yao Dehua volunteered. Without any foundation or help, he forcefully pulled out a team and fought a bloody path out of the oligopoly formed by the three major translation companies. Finally, he completed the counterattack. The process was difficult and tortuous, and it couldn't be explained in a few words. After more than a decade of development, Yao Dehua finally didn't have to look up to his brother's achievements. Poplar fruit helped him cross the last hurdle, and it also drew a perfect end to his victory. The independence of the translation company was a new beginning for Yao Dehua. This time, he finally got rid of his brother's control and the shackles of his family. He held 60% of the shares of the new company. It could be said that Yao Dehua's next step was to fight for himself. The two chatted. One was enraptured, and the other was dazzled. They chatted for 2 hours, and it was as if they regretted not having met earlier. Yao Dehua even drove Poplar Fruit and Kiki home. When they finally left, Yao Dehua still reluctantly put his arm around Poplar Fruit's shoulder and said to Poplar Fruit, "Xiao Yang, you can't leave because of your child, but it's okay. I'll leave a position for you. Within 2 years, if you want, you can come to me at any time." Poplar Fruit was also a little moved, and he said, "Okay, Brother Yao, if I really want to work, I'll choose your company first. Haha, I'll wait for you. I really hope to fight for the country with you." Yao Dehua laughed and said goodbye to Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit watched Yao Dehua's car disappear at the corner of the road, and then he turned to go home. Poplar Fruit smiled as he pushed the cart back. He sighed in his heart. Today, he had met a boss worthy of being friends with. Yao Dehua was born into a rich family, but he did not have the aura of a playboy, and he was still able to achieve such great results. Poplar Fruit did not know why, but he suddenly thought of Han Tao, who was driven back to the countryside. He shook his head. They were all rich second generations, but how could there be such a big difference between people? Back home, Poplar Fruit fed Kiki milk, and then spread a carpet on the floor of the living room for Kiki to lie on. Now that Kiki was more than 3 months pregnant, it was time for her to practice turning over. It could also be considered as the beginning of her contact with sports. Poplar Fruit's method was different from others, and others could not learn it. He spread his legs and lay down in a push-up position. His left hand was on Kiki's left side, and his right hand was suspended in the air. Then he used his left hand to support himself and did push-ups. Kiki was also interested in watching her father's face become bigger and bigger, and then slowly move away. She smiled and raised her little hand high, wanting to reach her father's mouth. Poplar Fruit would not let her do as she wished. Every time he did a push-up and bent down, he would use his empty right hand to turn Kiki over. Kiki would tirelessly turn back, just wanting to touch her father. After doing 10 push-ups with his left hand, Poplar Fruit switched to his right hand and went to Kiki's right side. Kiki liked this kind of game very much. Every time her father turned her over, she would burst into laughter. Then she would quickly turn over and wait for her father to turn her over again. Poplar Fruit switched from his left hand to his right hand, and then from his right hand to his left hand, and did push-ups with one hand for almost 20 minutes. Even Poplar Fruit's arm would feel sore with this amount of exercise. But as long as he saw Kiki's big innocent eyes, Poplar Fruit would feel invigorated again. It was already hot outside today, and after coming back and doing so much exercise, Poplar Fruit's clothes were wet and dry, and his whole body was sticky. He could not wait to take a cold shower immediately. But now there was a little ancestor in front of him to entertain. Poplar Fruit had to prepare hot water for her to take a bath first. Although it had been less than half a month since he cut Kiki's hair, Poplar Fruit was surprised to find that Kiki's hair had grown a lot. Originally, except for the part on the top of her head that was deliberately long, the rest of her hair was so short that her scalp could be seen. Today, Poplar Fruit paid attention to it and found that it was almost as long as half a knuckle. Kiki's hair was very good, which was probably a combination of Poplar Fruit's and Wu Yu's characteristics. Poplar Fruit's hair was very black, and it was not interrupted. Kiki's hair was now pure black, and it was no longer mixed with light yellow fetal hair like before. Kiki's hair was very soft, and even the hair stubble that had just grown out did not feel prickly to the touch. Poplar Fruit had seen Wu Yu's appearance when she was alive. Her hair was just like the shampoo commercials on TV. It was so soft that if you put a comb on it, it would slide down by itself. He hoped that when Kiki grew up in the future, she would also grow beautiful long hair like a waterfall. Poplar Fruit gently dried Kiki's hair with a towel, and the soft towel gently rubbed Kiki's ears. Kiki obediently lay in Poplar Fruit's arms without moving. Her pair of eyes that were as clean and clear as the sky lake in Changbai Mountain looked at her father lovingly. One of her small hands tightly grasped the corner of her father's clothes, and the other small hand hugged her father's thick waist. She felt very at ease. It was as if her father's head was the sky, his thighs were the earth, and her father's embrace was the world. Poplar Fruit did not know why, but he thought of a poem he had seen online. When my hair reaches my waist, will the young man marry me? When your black hair is straight, will you be willing to spread 10 miles of red dowry? But if your hair reaches your waist, the young man will fall in love with someone else. When your black hair is straight, I will smile at her smiling face in your arms. He shouts 10 miles of red dowry? A daughter's dream. After repeating it a few times in his heart, Poplar Fruit felt that his nose was a little sour. When your hair reaches your waist, your father will have already become old. When your hair reaches your waist, you will be about to get married. How can your father bear to watch you go away? Without you, how can your father live? Kiki, when your hair reaches your waist, will it be better if you don't grow up? Poplar Fruit repeated it in his heart. But he also knew that this was just wishful thinking. That was just his wild imagination. How can there be a father whose daughter was only 3 months old and was already afraid of her getting married? Poplar Fruit, that's enough. With this thought, he dried her hair for a long time. In the end, even Kiki could not help but protest. Poplar Fruit then realized that he had thought too far ahead. He looked at Kiki's innocent face and smiled awkwardly. After wiping her body clean, he quickly carried her back to the room to change her clothes. Actually, Poplar Fruit's situation was not difficult to understand. 2 or 3 months ago, Poplar Fruit and Lu Yunran broke up, saying goodbye to his first love of 4 years. After that, he had been in unbearable pain. Suddenly, there was one person who was incomparably important to him in his life. There was even a period of time when he was absent-minded, as if he had lost his spiritual support. Later, Kiki's serious illness made Poplar Fruit completely understand, so he shifted the focus of his life to Kiki. Although he did things that he would never have imagined doing for Kiki all day long, Poplar Fruit was in a happy mood. Even if he had to wake up in the middle of the night in a daze, he was willing to do it. If Poplar Fruit was compared to a planet like Earth, then Kiki was the sun that it revolved around. If the sun suddenly disappeared, they would not be able to survive. Kiki was also important to Poplar Fruit. Although Kiki was now very attached to Poplar Fruit and could not leave him when she was awake, Poplar Fruit was also attached to Kiki and enjoyed the happy and sad times with Kiki. Poplar Fruit did not dare to imagine if his life could continue if Kiki left. This was also the reason why he felt like his heart was being cut by a knife when he thought of Kiki getting married. Looking at Kiki, who had become beautiful after putting on her clothes, Poplar Fruit bent down with a smile and kissed her little face. Perhaps they kissed for too long. Poplar Fruit's hair was pulled by Kiki. Although it was a little painful, listening to Kiki's happy laughter made Poplar Fruit's heart as sweet as honey. Chi-Chi, you're an angel that the heavens have bestowed upon Daddy. Daddy will always protect you. Chapter 64. Time ticked by, and in the blink of an eye, it was the beginning of August. The college entrance examination results were basically out. Every year, the college entrance examination was like 1,000 soldiers and horses trying to squeeze through a wooden bridge. Some people succeeded, while others fell off the bridge. They could only wait patiently and wait for the next year to try again. These days, Poplar Fruit went online and found that Weibo and the news were dominated by college entrance examination fans. Many people posted their results and admission results, looking forward to the beautiful 4 years of college life. However, Poplar Fruit knew that there were many people who were sad and hiding away to lick their wounds. Life was like this. You couldn't expect it to be smooth sailing. You could only pray that you could stand on the winning side. You didn't need to cover your ears with a pillow to block out the sound of firecrackers outside the window. You didn't need to look at other people's comforting smiles, because it all looked so ironic, and you looked so pathetic. Poplar Fruit was considered lucky that he didn't become one of the people who were squeezed out. Of course, this wasn't about the college entrance examination. Today, he received a message from Ingyan Webb again. The message said that he had passed the recruitment examination for sect leader Qiao's biography. This time, someone called him to congratulate him for being one of the 10 people who made it to the top 10 in the second round of the examination. Next was the final round of the examination. The person who contacted him explained to Poplar Fruit that as long as he passed the final round of the examination, he could become one of the translators for the Chinese version of sect leader Qiao's biography. Thinking about it, Poplar Fruit was a little excited. However, it was useless to be excited. The final round of the examination didn't start immediately. The person who contacted Poplar Fruit sent a contract to Poplar Fruit. This was the confidentiality agreement for the final round of the examination. As the final round of the examination involved the translation of part of the original manuscript, it couldn't be sloppy. The organizers had to prevent translators who didn't pass this round from leaking the manuscript. Good things come with setbacks. Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly and comforted himself. He went out and printed out the confidentiality agreement, signed it, and sent it back to Ingyan Webb. Now he could only wait. Poplar Fruit returned home and continued his translation work. A few days ago, he received another big order. It was a promotional material for a medical institution. This medical institution wanted to participate in an exhibition abroad to promote TCM equipment in medicine, so they specially made gorgeous posters and brochures to impress the purchasing staff of foreign hospitals. But they never thought that how could foreigners understand the slogans that they put together with classical Chinese and ancient poems? They had also looked for many translation companies to help them translate, but they either translated directly, which made others confused, or the translation quality was still not satisfactory after the translators had processed it. Speaking of which, the translation company couldn't be blamed for this. This medical institution's promotional materials were not ordinary industry technical documents. It was simply a literary work of more than 20,000 words. Moreover, it was not an ordinary literary work. It read in a genteel way, with all kinds of ancient Chinese allusions in it. Even Poplar Fruit felt a bit of a headache when reading it, let alone the translators of ordinary translation companies. They hit a wall again and finally found Yao Dehua. They hoped to get a satisfactory translation within a week. They were indeed in the medical field, and they were all big tycoons. They directly offered a price of 1,000 yuan per 1,000 words. Yao Dehua hesitated for a long time before accepting it. Many companies had been defeated by this order, and Yao Dehua also knew that. The industry had already been abuzz for a long time. Some companies who were not convinced even said that this promotional material was simply untranslatable, and whoever accepted it was an idiot. The entire translation industry in Guangdong province was waiting to see which other company would be defeated by this order. Yao Dehua understood that challenges and opportunities coexisted. If he accepted this order, he would either succeed or die trying. If he failed, he might become the topic of conversation after dinner and become another joke in the industry. But what if he really succeeded? He would give a big slap to those who wanted to laugh at him. Not only that, Xinda Translation Company could also take advantage of this opportunity to set a benchmark in the industry. In the future, who wouldn't know that Xinda Translation Company was the most powerful translation company in Guangdong province? After accepting this task, Yao Dehua let the company's 4 gold translators take a look. They all shook their heads, saying that this task was too difficult, and they were not confident that they could translate a satisfactory result. Wu Pings walked into Yao Dehua's office worriedly and asked him with a sigh, "Boss, isn't it too risky to accept this task? We actually don't lack this 20,000 yuan. Yao Dehua rubbed his bald head and said with a wry smile, "Of course, I'm not going for the money. Although our company has been registered, it hasn't been announced to the outside world. This is a big opportunity. If it's successful, our reputation will really be established. It's just that I didn't expect that even you guys don't have the confidence. I feel that this step is too big, and I'm afraid that it will pull the balls. Boss, why don't we look for poplar fruit? Wu Ping said. Can he do it? Yao Dehua asked. I've seen a few of his tasks before, and I feel that he is still very good at literary translation. Besides, we have no other better way than looking for him. If poplar fruit can't do it, I'm sure that no one in Guangdong province can do it. Yao Dehua nodded and said, Okay, I'll call him and tell him. By the way, didn't you say that he was doing a task last time? You guys should be prepared to take over. The reward for the task will still be given to poplar fruit. Whoever does it, the company will also have additional subsidies. The most important thing now is to finish this task first. So, this task was finally handed over to poplar fruit. To be honest, although this task was also 1,000 yuan per 1,000 words, it was not simpler than the 100,000 yuan task last time. When poplar fruit saw this document for the first time, he was dizzy. His eyes were full of literary words, which he had never seen before in his career as a translator. However, poplar fruit did not back down. Instead, he rubbed his hands and felt very excited. The more challenging it was, the more interesting it would be. Flipping through those technical documents every day was like copying a book. It was really easy to memorize a paragraph and rewrite it. It was rare to encounter such a task that he could use his brain. How could poplar fruit not feel happy? Of course, although he was very happy, poplar fruit still paid attention to this document. It was indeed a document that had stumped countless translators. Poplar fruit read it carefully. There were more than 100 sentences in more than 20,000 words that could not be translated directly. After marking these sentences, poplar fruit categorized them into two categories: those that could be replaced with foreign allusions, and those that could not be replaced. Poplar fruit had also frantically searched the internet for allusions that matched the meaning of the former. Some of them were too obscure and could not be found, so he had to categorize them into the latter category. The latter was the most difficult translation of the entire document. Poplar fruit also racked his brains and constantly tried various translation techniques. In order to make the meaning clear, the order of some sentences was even messed up by poplar fruit. Even so, poplar fruit still spent a long time smoothing out these 100 sentences. Including today, poplar fruit took a total of 4 days. Fortunately, after doing all this, the rest was much simpler. Poplar fruit only needed to translate the remaining 10,000 words, and then make some adjustments. Poplar fruit, who had been busy for the whole day, could finally breathe a sigh of relief and give himself some time to rest and adjust. Tonight, Kiki was particularly active. He did not know if it was because she slept too much during the day, but she still did not feel sleepy at 8 o'clock. Poplar fruit wanted to carry her back to the bedroom to sleep, but she desperately struggled, unwilling to lie on the bed alone. Poplar fruit had no choice but to carry her to the living room. He spread a blanket in the middle of the living room and let her lie down and play on it. Poplar fruit was holding a book and reading by the side, his left hand still supporting Kiki. Although Kiki did not know how to crawl yet, poplar fruit was still worried that she would accidentally roll somewhere else. It would be troublesome if she bumped into something. Kiki was happily twisting and turning on the blanket. She found that she could not get rid of her father's big hand no matter how hard she tried. So she simply lay down on the blanket, biting the pacifier while playing with her father's hand. Kiki's hand was still very small. She could only hold one section of her father's finger, but she was still playing with her father's left hand excitedly. She was not tired of playing with her father's left hand. Ouch! Poplar fruit was reading the book when he suddenly felt a sudden pain in his palm. He could not help but retract his hand. Poplar fruit turned his left palm over and looked at it carefully. There was a long red mark, and there was even a thin line of blood oozing out. Kiki, who was the culprit, was still waving her small hand proudly. If she was not biting the pacifier, poplar fruit believed that she would definitely laugh out loud. This girl. Poplar fruit touched his hand. It did not hurt anymore, but he did not expect that his skin was rough and thick. She actually scratched his skin. It was only 3 months, and her fingernails were already so long. Poplar fruit held Kiki in his arms, picked up one of her arms, and placed her small hand on his right palm with his right hand to examine it carefully. Sure enough, Kiki's fingernails had grown out. She was now like a kitten that did not retract her claws. As long as she pressed them on Poplar fruit's skin, they would leave a deep mark. If she casually scratched his body, with Kiki's current delicate skin, wouldn't she hurt him? Poplar fruit was a little scared when he thought about it. Moreover, when her fingernails grew out, it would be easy for her to get dirty. Now that she had a pacifier, it was better. If she was like before, biting her fingers every day, who knew how many germs she had ingested? He could not delay any longer. Half an hour later, Kiki was finally tired and fell asleep. Poplar fruit took out a nail clipper from the drawer and ran to the kitchen to rinse it repeatedly with water. In the end, he was still not satisfied, so he took out some alcohol from the cupboard to disinfect it again. Kiki lay on the sofa and slept soundly. Poplar fruit knelt on the floor. He pulled Kiki's small hand and held it in his own. Poplar fruit placed his arm on his thigh to prevent his hand from shaking and pinching Kiki's flesh. Separating her fingers, Poplar fruit began to cut from her index finger. He did not dare to cut too short, so he left a little bit. Then he tried to cut as curved as possible. He touched it with his left thumb, and then trimmed the parts that were not smooth. Poplar fruit took almost 5 minutes to cut the first finger. After that he became more skilled. After cutting all the fingernails, Poplar fruit stood up and found that his feet were numb. Poplar fruit found a wet towel and wiped Kiki's 2 small hands that had just been cut. He smiled with satisfaction. Great! It was like a piece of art. Poplar fruit, you're amazing, he thought proudly in his heart. Chapter 65. In August, because of the typhoon, there were a few heavy rains, and the weather was finally not so hot. The typhoon had just passed. Taking advantage of the fact that there were still a few clouds floating in the sky, and the summer heat hadn't recovered, Song Jiwen ran over to Poplar fruit and wanted to organize a hiking trip. Poplar fruit, who stayed at home in front of the computer all day, felt that he was going to go crazy from staying at home, so he immediately agreed. However, it was better to have fun together than to have fun alone. Moreover, if only Poplar fruit went alone, he would become a third wheel between Song Jiwen and Kitten. Therefore, Poplar fruit also called Duan Xueching. Early on Saturday morning, Song Jiwen drove the car, took Poplar fruit and Kiki to the market to buy some things, and then picked up Duan Xueching and Kitten. The 5 of them drove to Baiyun Mountain. At the foot of Baiyun Mountain, Song Jiwen bought the tickets and drove the car to the parking lot. Since they were here to hike, there was no need to drive up. After getting out of the car, Poplar fruit took the biggest backpack from Song Jiwen's hand and carried it. The others also carried a backpack. Song Jiwen's neck also hung a big SLR camera. Duan Xueching walked beside Poplar fruit and looked at the backpack that was as big as a hiking backpack. She asked with some concern, "Brother Yang, is this heavy? Do you want to put some in my bag? I don't have many things." "It's okay. He is strong now." Song Jiwen smiled and walked past them with Kitten. Poplar fruit held Kiki in front of his chest with a strap. She just woke up and looked at the unfamiliar environment in a daze. Her head leaned on her father's chest and felt the heartbeat that made her feel safe. Poplar fruit smiled and weighed the backpack on his back. He said to Duan Xueching, "It's okay. It's not that heavy. Let's go." With Song Jiwen leading the way, they slowly climbed up the stone steps on the left side of the driveway. The sky was a little gloomy today, but there was no sign of rain. This kind of weather was perfect for traveling. As they climbed up the mountain path, a gentle breeze caressed them. The lush trees on the mountain swayed with the wind, as if welcoming their arrival. Last night, a heavy rain seemed to have fallen on Mount Baiyun. Looking from afar, one could only see clouds and mist lingering around the mountain. It was as if one had arrived at the abode of an immortal. Climbing the mountain would definitely be a very tiring thing if one just kept climbing. Poplar fruit, and the others didn't come just for exercise. So every time they arrived at a new scenic spot, Song Jiwen would ask everyone to come and take photos. Other than taking photos together, most of the time, Poplar Fruit would help him and Kitten take photos. Because Poplar Fruit was carrying Kiki in many bags, it was a little inconvenient. Duan Xueqing was introverted and wouldn't jump around like Kitten. Whenever she saw something new, she would ask Song Jiwen to help her take photos. Of course, Song Jiwen would also have a smirk on his face. He would push Poplar Fruit and Duan Xueqing together and let the two of them stand together to take photos. Kiki was very excited about taking photos. Every time the camera pointed at her, the corners of her mouth would curl up happily. However, Poplar Fruit and Duan Xueqing weren't so natural. Especially when Song Jiwen asked the two of them to pose very intimately, Poplar Fruit was completely stiff. Although Kitten laughed and jumped around to add fuel to the fire, Poplar Fruit just leaned against Duan Xueqing for the photo. He wouldn't go any further. After a few rounds, Duan Xueqing and Kitten's cheeks were red. However, Kitten's cheeks were red because she was too excited and tired from jumping around. Duan Xueqing's cheeks were red because she was shy and couldn't stand it. She looked at Poplar Fruit and didn't dare to look directly into his eyes. Taking photos was only a small interlude throughout the entire journey. Poplar Fruit and the others didn't stop walking and kept walking forward. When they arrived at the Pu Valley, they crossed the rippling lotus pond from the small bridge. From afar, they could see one of the 8 ancient sceneries of Yangcheng, Pu Jianlian Quan. The mountain stream gurgled and flowed slowly down the valley's steep rocks. Some tourists couldn't help but take off their shoes and jump in. The water only reached up to their ankles. However, now wasn't the best time to play in the water. If it was during a hot day, the clear and cool mountain spring would definitely attract more people to go into the water to cool off. Even so, the intertwined trees in the mountains were like a canopy, covering this place like a paradise. There was also sunlight that shone through the thin gaps. Everywhere it went, there were clusters of flowers, and among the dense greenery, there were a few spots of pink. Only then did it not appear too cold and monotonous. No matter how beautiful the scenery was, it couldn't slow down the pace of Poplar Fruit and the others. After taking a few photos, they continued to walk forward. They hadn't gone far from the Pu Valley when Poplar Fruit and the others saw an old temple. The small archway entered their eyes first. From right to left, the words Buddhist Realm were written on it. On the back, the words Repent and Be Saved were written. This is Nungren Temple, Song Jiwen introduced. However, there are no monks here anymore. Like the other scenic spots of Mount Baiyun, almost all the buildings here were rebuilt after the liberation. During the anti-Japanese war, the Japanese invaded Yangcheng, and the cultural relics on Mount Baiyun were destroyed along with the hills and trees. After the reconstruction, there were no monks who continued to cultivate here. However, this was also good. Without the smell of incense, the air of Mount Baiyun, which was known as the lung of the city, was better protected. Therefore, instead of calling the temple a Buddhist treasure land, it was better to call it a historical site that had witnessed history. In the courtyard of the temple, there was a large dark red stone that was constantly being washed by the fountain. The stone was called Dream of the Century. Looking at the introduction, it was transported from the Three Gorges. This made Poplar Fruit a little speechless. It was a large stone that weighed dozens of tons. The kitten pulled Duan Xueqing over to take photos intimately. Kiki was also very interested in the big stone and squeaked. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to go over and let her pat the big stone with her small hand. After so many years of washing, the big stone had no dust on it. When Kiki patted it, it was slippery. Although it was clean, her hand was still wet. Poplar Fruit had to take out a tissue to wipe her hand. Poplar Fruit preferred the dragon carvings on the eaves of the temple. The dragon carvings were different from each other, but they were all in the shape of bearing fangs and brandishing claws. The carvings were lifelike. After the baptism of time, the dragon carvings were a little damaged. The color was also stained by rain and moss. After passing Nungren Temple, the mountain road became steep. Poplar Fruit and the others climbed to the next scenic spot. After passing by the Tianan First Peak, Poplar Fruit, and the others came to the square on the top of the mountain. In the square surrounded by heavy guardrails, the kitten, who was walking in front of Song Jiwen, suddenly shouted, "Poplar Fruit," and the others looked in the direction the kitten was pointing. Only then did they understand why she was so excited. At this time, Poplar Fruit and the others were already on the top of the mountain. As far as the eye could see, the surrounding mountains were shrouded in amiable fog. Just now, when they looked at the mountain from below, they felt that the mountain was like an immortal's cave. Now they felt as if they were in an immortal's cave. Looking outside, they felt as if they were riding on clouds and mist. White clouds above Bayun Mountain, white clouds below Bayun Mountain. Didn't the beautiful scenery in front of them at this moment correspond to this poem? This place was also called White Clouds Looking at the Evening, and it really lived up to its name. Looking into the distance, they could see the whole city of Yangcheng. Looking at the faintly visible tall buildings through the fog from afar, it was like looking at a mirage. It was hard to tell whether it was real or fake. There was a rattan chair next to the guardrails. Song Jiwen put the camera in Poplar Fruit's hand and asked him to take photos for him. Song Jiwen swaggered like an evil advisor in ancient times. He sat inside with his legs spread apart, but his wrist was supporting his chin. He deliberately put on a cool expression on his face. The kitten was laughing beside him, which made Song Jiwen angry. The evil advisor sat in the rattan chair and shouted loudly. He forced the ignorant girl into his arms and ravaged her fiercely. As a frontline reporter, Poplar Fruit could not let this evil person succeed. He faithfully recorded all of this with the camera. In the future, he could give it to the kitten to settle accounts with him. After taking a few photos with each other, Song Jiwen said, "Let's go down." "Ah, we worked so hard to climb up, why are we going down again?" The kitten said with a bitter face. Song Jiwen explained, "If we go down we will reach the Spring Valley. If you don't go, you will definitely regret it, because there are a lot of birds in there." "Wow, really? Let's go, let's go." The kitten pulled Song Jiwen with a face full of surprise and rushed down first. Poplar Fruit shook his head and looked at Duan Xueqing with a bitter smile. The two of them followed behind from a distance. Seeing the sweat on Duan Xueqing's forehead, Poplar Fruit considerately asked, "Xueqing, is this heavy? Let me help you carry it." Duan Xueqing looked at Poplar Fruit's sparkling eyes, lowered her head a little shyly and said softly, "And no need, I can do it." Duan Xueqing and Poplar Fruit walked side by side, and the passers-by on the road all looked at them. It couldn't be helped. The man was tall and handsome, the woman was beautiful and outstanding, and they even brought along a beautifully dressed cute baby. It was like a big celebrity family going on a trip, making the passers-by envious. "Come over quickly." From afar the kitten waved at them. Looking at her excited expression, it was as if she had discovered a new continent. Poplar Fruit and Duan Xueqing smiled slightly, and the two of them quickly walked up. So many birds. As they got closer, even the usually calm Duan Xueqing could not help but exclaim softly. There were indeed a lot of birds. There were many bird houses built along the road. Some of the houses had nests in the trees, and some didn't even have a nest. "This is a peacock," the kitten called. Everyone followed her line of sight. A peacock with a long tail was leisurely jumping from the ground to a branch half a meter high. It proudly turned its head and disdained to pay attention to Poplar Fruit and the others. The kitten went up and looked for a long time, then ran back in frustration and said, "Ah, it doesn't even spread its tail. I'm so anxious." Poplar Fruit smiled and comforted her. Peacocks usually spread their tails in spring. It's very rare for us to see one at this time. However, there were all kinds of birds in the garden, and peacocks were not the only attractive ones. The kitten's attention was quickly diverted. "Everyone come and see," Song Jiwen suddenly shouted. Poplar Fruit and the others all gathered around. "Look, there are big roosters here." Looking carefully, there were 3 big roosters. 2 of them had pure white feathers, but the coxcombs were red like fire. One of them had a chest, abdomen, and tail feathers that were pure black and shiny, but the neck was white and brown. Poplar Fruit, who came from the countryside, recognized the 3 roosters. He said, "These chickens are called Yuanbao chickens. Look at them, their tails are up and inward, and their necks are high. Don't they look like Yuanbao?" The kitten nodded vigorously and listened very carefully. "Let's look at the next one. I heard that there are red-crowned cranes. Let's look for them," Poplar Fruit said. He had just glanced at the introduction at the entrance of Mingchun Valley. It said, "There are more than 150 species of birds in the garden, including red-crowned cranes, swans, peacocks, yellow-bellied tragopan, blue pheasants, and more than 5,000 birds." Now they had seen the peacocks but not the red-crowned cranes. Chapter 66. As they walked past a small cage, Poplar Fruit and the others suddenly heard a strange voice. "Hello!" Who was greeting them? They turned around to look for the voice, but there was no one around them. "Hello!" Just as Poplar Fruit and the others were in shock, the strange voice sounded again. This time, Poplar Fruit found out that it was a black myna in the cage next to them that was talking to them. Seeing the myna stretching its head and looking at them, Kiki became very happy for some reason. She wriggled in Poplar Fruit's arms excitedly, clapping her little hands and squealing loudly. Her crisp voice covered the sporadic chirping of the birds in the park. At this moment a shocking scene occurred. With Kiki's cheerful voice, the sleepy birds in the park all became excited. They flapped their wings and flew to the corner closest to Kiki. The whole Mingchun Valley was drowned in the singing of all kinds of birds. If there were no cages to separate them, they would probably have flown directly to them. "The peacock is spreading its tail," the sharp-eyed kitten shouted, pointing at the peacock that had made her go back in vain. Poplar Fruit looked over. Indeed, the proud peacock was facing them. The feathers on its back were like a folding fan that was slowly spreading out, reflecting the sunlight. It looked very beautiful. Song Jiwen quickly took out his SLR camera and took pictures. The myna next to him did not forget to grab a few shots. It also jumped to the side of the cage, holding the iron wire firmly with its 2 claws and shouted, "Hello! I love you." Its strange pronunciation made Poplar Fruit and the others laugh. In their happiness, they forgot that all the commotion was caused by Kiki's cry. When the other tourists saw this rare scene of hundreds of birds paying homage, they all raised their cameras and quickly took pictures of these rare birds, while they were showing their most beautiful side. They did not have time to trace the source of the incident. There was also a white parrot dancing excitedly in the cage, trying to attract Kiki's attention. However, after Kiki called out once, she sat quietly on her father's chest and continued to look around. She did not continue to cause a ruckus, so the commotion of the birds gradually subsided. Even the peacock with its tail spread out, after the Poplar Fruit and the others had walked far away, retracted its beautiful tail feathers and hid behind the bushes. The tourists who came up later heard the tourists in front of them talking excitedly about what had just happened. They realized that they had missed such a spectacular scene because they had been lazy on the road. They were full of regret. They beat their chests and stamped their feet, sighing. As they walked down, Poplar Fruit and the others finally saw the red-crowned crane that they had been looking for a long time. These red-crowned cranes seemed to have taken good care of themselves. Their feathers were glossy, apart from their throats, necks, tails, and legs which were black, and their heads were vermilion red. The rest of their feathers were flawless white. Looking at them walking leisurely in the cage, their postures were simply too elegant. Seeing the tourists coming over, the red-crowned cranes slowly walked over. They looked at Poplar Fruit and the others with gentle eyes. Kitten walked forward, and a red-crowned crane came up to her. It tilted its head and looked at her. In fact, the red-crowned crane wanted her to feed it. This made Kitten very happy. She quickly asked Song Jiwen to take a picture of it for her. Seeing such beautiful creatures, Poplar Fruit could not hold back. He walked forward, squatted down, and greeted the red-crowned cranes with a smile. Kiki saw it and was very happy. She stretched out her hand to get close to the cage, but she could not reach it. She turned back and patted her father's chest gently. "No, you can't touch it. What if it pecks you?" Poplar Fruit gently persuaded Kiki, but Kiki did not care. Seeing that her father was not willing to move, She hummed softly in dissatisfaction. At this time, Poplar Fruit saw that the biggest and most beautiful red-crowned crane came over. It bent its head and retracted its long beak into the cage. However, its round head stretched out, and its red top gently rubbed against the net of the cage. Did it want people to touch it? Poplar Fruit felt that it was a little unbelievable. He had never seen such a considerate red-crowned crane, even in the books. Of course, except in Xinxia novels. Kiki was impatiently rubbing against Poplar Fruit's chest. At this time, her beautiful big eyes were floating with mist. It seemed that if her father did not agree, she would immediately cry in front of him. Poplar Fruit had to slowly bend over with his right hand in front of him, in case the red-crowned crane had any excessive reaction and hurt Kiki. However, he quickly realized that his worries were unnecessary. The red-crowned crane was very quiet. Kiki's small hand gently stroked the red-crowned crane's head, like an elder comforting a junior. Not only was the red-crowned crane not displeased, it even squinted its brown eyes in enjoyment. Kiki was very happy. After retracting her hand, she even patted her father's right hand and giggled. Just as he straightened his back, Poplar Fruit found that the red-crowned cranes in the cage were not calm anymore. Under the lead of the biggest and most beautiful red-crowned crane, they were running and jumping in the not-so-big cage. They jumped in the air, spread their wings, stretched their backs, and raised their heads. The leading red-crowned crane pointed its beak upwards, raised its head to the sky, and spread its wings. Ho! Ho! Song! And the other red-crowned cranes echoed it loudly. They called out to each other, or bent their backs and jumped, or raised their heads and kicked, or spread their wings and walked, or bent their backs and bowed. They danced beautifully, making people feel relaxed and happy. They wished they could grow a pair of wings and join them. This was the crane dance. Poplar Fruit watched for a long time before he was surprised. He had only seen this scene on CCTV's Animal World. Now he could actually see it with his own eyes in front of such a small cage. It was really rare. Not only Poplar Fruit, but Song Jiwen, Kitten, and Duan Xueqing were also stunned. It was not until the crane dance gradually stopped that they recovered from such a beautiful dance. Poplar Fruit turned to Song Jiwen and said, "Mosquito, did you get a picture?" Song Jiwen shook the DSLR in his hand in annoyance and said, "No, I just wanted to see it and forgot to take a picture." "What a pity." Kitten sighed. Duan Xueqing also nodded in agreement. "It's okay." Poplar Fruit comforted them. "Being able to see it once means that we have no regrets on this trip. Don't ask for too much." Indeed, such a scene should only exist in heaven. How many times could one see it in the human world? To be able to see such a beautiful scene up close, and leave it deeply in one's memory, was already the best gift from heaven. After seeing the crane dance, only a bare mountain wall, and the dripping rock with flowing water, could not attract Poplar Fruit and the others to stop and watch. They followed the original route and climbed towards Nine Dragon Spring. After climbing for a long time, the sun was already close to noon. The girls were all sweating profusely and were exhausted. "We're almost at Nine Dragon Spring. Let's take a break there," Song Jiwen suggested. Poplar Fruit was still very energetic, but seeing the girls' expressions, he nodded and agreed to Song Jiwen's suggestion. When they arrived at Nine Dragon Spring, Poplar Fruit and the others found a shady place. They took out a plastic carpet from Poplar Fruit's backpack and laid it under the shade of a tree. Then, everyone sat on it and ate the lunch they bought in the morning. Because they were too tired, the girls only ate a few mouthfuls of food before putting it down. As expected, Poplar Fruit smiled and took out a few clean big red apples and a can of fruit from his backpack. Kitten said in surprise, "Wow, is your backpack Tinkerbell's pocket? Is there anything good in it? Hurry up and take it out." Everyone laughed heartily. Poplar Fruit was not in a hurry to eat. Instead, he took out a thermos and a milk bottle from his backpack. He used hot water to make a bottle of milk for Kiki to drink. After playing with Kiki for the whole morning, she was also tired. After drinking the milk, she fell asleep. After eating, everyone took the opportunity to rest. The energetic Poplar Fruit had nothing to do. He held Song Jiwen's DSLR and walked around. As he walked, he arrived at Yangcheng's steel forest. Yangcheng's steel forest had a collection of famous people and literati praising Lingnan, Yangcheng, and Baiyun Mountain. The black marble stele was quietly erected on the side of the mountain road. It was hidden in the dense green leaves. Poplar Fruit carefully looked at the words on it. Each stele's handwriting was different. However, the handwriting was either vigorous or elegant. Even Poplar Fruit, who did not understand calligraphy, felt that it was very beautiful. Perhaps it was time to practice calligraphy in the future. Poplar Fruit thought to himself. He typed on the computer every day, but his own handwriting was a bit ugly. Now that he looked at the famous works, Poplar Fruit was extremely envious. When Poplar Fruit leisurely walked back, the group was ready to set off again. There was a saying in Yangcheng. If you don't reach Baiyun Mountain, you can't be considered to have come to Yangcheng. If you don't go to Moxing Ridge, you can't be considered to have climbed Baiyun Mountain. Under Song Jiwen's provocation, the girls gritted their teeth and began to climb again. This time, Poplar Fruit did not let Duan Xueqing continue to carry her backpack. He held Duan Xueqing's backpack in his hand. This bit of weight was nothing to Poplar Fruit. It would be easier for her to climb the mountain if she carried light. Duan Xueqing accompanied Poplar Fruit as they climbed step by step. Although they did not lean on each other like a couple, Duan Xueqing felt sweet in her heart. Xiao Mao's backpack was also given to Song Jiwen. However, halfway up, Song Jiwen could not carry it anymore. In the end, it was given to Poplar Fruit. Even so, after climbing the mountain, everyone was almost paralyzed from exhaustion. However, Poplar Fruit, who was carrying bags of various sizes, was still full of energy. Duan Xueqing leaned against the stone railing panting. Her bangs on her forehead were wet with sweat and stuck messily to her head. Suddenly, she saw a large hand in front of her, holding a bottle of mineral water. She looked up and saw Poplar Fruit looking at her with a smile. He said, "Drink some water. You look exhausted." "Okay." Duan Xueqing lowered her head slightly and took the water. Her cheeks suddenly turned bright red. She did not know if it was because she was tired from climbing the mountain or something else, but she looked very beautiful. However, Poplar Fruit did not notice. He had already turned around and handed the water to Song Jiwen and Xiao Mao. In the afternoon, they climbed the mountain for more than an hour. Then, everyone rested at the top of the mountain, took photos, and played for almost an hour. When they went down the mountain, they walked to the place where the cable car was. Everyone did not want to go down anymore, so they bought tickets and took the cable car down the mountain. Looking down at the pedestrians along the way from high up in the sky, Poplar Fruit suddenly realized that he had seen so many beautiful scenery today. The experience of traveling was really wonderful. It was better to travel 10,000 miles than to read 10,000 books. This was probably the feeling of traveling 10,000 miles. Poplar Fruit thought of his dream of becoming a gourmet traveler. If he traveled around the world, he might see more wonderful things. Chapter 67. Poplar Fruit had to wait for the translation manuscript from the Ingyan web. He postponed his original plan of returning to his hometown in August. Yang Gui thought to herself. But she did not expect the test translation to not be sent over yet. The reason is that the US translation was delayed, and they had just sent it out. In that case, they could only continue to wait. While waiting, Poplar Fruit finally finished learning Spanish. After learning Spanish, Poplar Fruit felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Spanish was the second most common language in the world, second only to Chinese. English, which was the most commonly learned language in China, was only ranked third. After learning Spanish, Poplar Fruit had mastered the top 3 languages in the world. Spanish was not easy to learn, especially its pronunciation. It was also the first time that Poplar Fruit came into contact with a large tongue sound. He had never encountered it in his previous studies of English, French, and German. Because it was his first time learning, there was no one to guide him. Poplar Fruit could only look for tutorials on the internet to study. In the beginning, Poplar Fruit curled his tongue and practiced exhalation all day long. After persisting for more than 10 days, he finally mastered the great tongue sound. It was also because he practiced too hard that Poplar Fruit's tongue was curled up when he spoke. Song Jiwen even laughed at him, saying that he met a fierce girl and got his tongue bitten while kissing. However, after learning the big tongue sound, Poplar Fruit realized that his tongue was much better. Moreover, the big tongue sound had many other benefits. Especially when she was teasing Chi-Chi, Yang-Guo would roll her tongue and make a series of lele sounds. Chi-Chi would be so shocked that her little mouth would turn into an O shape, and then she would laugh happily. Other things that needed to be memorized, such as the Latin alphabet, the use of punctuation marks different from English and Chinese, such as inverted question marks and inverted exclamation marks, grammar, vocabulary, and so on, were not difficult for Poplar Fruit. All he needed to do was spend some time, and it was not a problem. After learning Spanish, Poplar Fruit realized that those who could speak in languages were definitely not ordinary people. Let's not talk about those Spanish, English, German, and French words that look a bit similar. In terms of word structure, Spanish, French, and German are all divided into feminine and masculine, but the masculine and feminine of each language are different. Spanish was very strange. For example, men's shirts were feminine. But who would have thought that men's shirts were feminine? Do men wear women's clothes? If Poplar Fruit had not been able to master all of them through rote memorization, and if he wanted to determine the masculine and the feminine like other people, wouldn't he have been driven crazy by all kinds of strange rules after learning 2 or 3 languages? When Poplar Fruit was looking for foreigners to practice Spanish on the internet, he also found that there were differences in the accents of Spanish spoken in different places. This might be the same as the various dialects of Chinese. Poplar Fruit practiced Castilian, which was the language that people usually referred to. Some people said that Spanish was a language to talk to God. Poplar Fruit did not think much of it. In terms of beauty, Poplar Fruit felt that Chinese and French were not inferior to Spanish. However, Spanish songs were still very pleasant to listen to. For example, the theme song of last year's World Cup, Waka Waka, was written and sung by Shakira. Every time Poplar Fruit listened to it, he felt his blood boil. The advantage of learning Spanish was that Spanish and Portuguese were very similar in writing, but there were certain differences in pronunciation. However, compared to learning a new language from scratch, this was much better. Just how similar were they? In fact, the difference between the words may be only 1 or 2 letters, and there was not much difference in grammar. Generally, Spanish speakers could easily read Portuguese books and vice versa. However, the pronunciation needed to be relearned. Here was an analogy. The difference between Spanish and Portuguese was like the difference between Mandarin and Cantonese. The grammatical structure was not much different, but the pronunciation of words was different. It was difficult to guess correctly. It took a lot of effort to understand. Learning had to be done step by step, and it was important to strike a balance between work and rest. Recently, Song Jiwen's work was not so busy, so as long as he was free at night, Song Jiwen would take Poplar Fruit to the gym to exercise. The reason why they did not play basketball was mainly because Kiki needed someone to take care of her. If Kitten did not come to help take care of her, Poplar Fruit would not feel at ease leaving her alone to play. However, Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen's favorite was still playing basketball. Therefore, on another weekend, Kitten came as promised. Poplar Fruit quickly pulled Song Jiwen, changed into the jersey and shoes, and walked to the basketball court. Sitting on the sidelines and waiting for the change, Uncle Jean Su Kai saw Poplar Fruit and the others from afar. He patted his butt, stood up, and greeted them with a smile. He smiled and said, "Xiao Yang, after waiting for half a month, I can finally wait for you again." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Uncle Jean, are you so eager to see me? Wouldn't it be easier for you to play without us?" Uncle Jean smiled and said, "Ah, the feeling of being defeated by Dugu is not good. With you guys here, we can play with more passion." Since there were new people, Uncle Jean asked everyone to form a new team. After warming up, Poplar Fruit, Song Jiwen, and an uncle who looked to be in his 40s formed a team. Because the ball did not pass, Uncle Jean, Uncle Dao, and Uncle Ban sat off the court and waited. This time, Poplar Fruit changed his style of breaking through and passing the ball to his teammates. He let Song Jiwen be the point guard, and he moved in and out of position. As long as the opponent was not paying attention, he could run out of space. Although Song Jiwen, as a point guard, did not have a wide passing field and did not control the strength of the pass very well, he just stared at Poplar Fruit, grasped the timing very well, and passed 2 good balls in a row. Poplar Fruit also shot after receiving the ball. Whether there was anyone in front of him or not, his shot was like his sniper rifle. As long as he threw it out, it could steadily go into the basket. This guy, he has become stronger again, Uncle Gene thought to himself. In the past, Poplar Fruit had not shown such accurate shooting. Now that he showed his shooting ability, it was even harder to defend. After 2 consecutive shots were scored by Poplar Fruit, the group of uncles on the opposite side decided to send someone to follow Poplar Fruit at all costs. Wherever Poplar Fruit went, he would be there. He was like a gangrene attached to the bone, and there was no way to get rid of him. But how could Poplar Fruit be so easy to stop? He first passed the ball back to Song Jiwen, then ran to the other side. Although he still could not get rid of him, when Poplar Fruit received the ball again, he did not choose to shoot immediately. Instead, he tapped lightly, and the uncle who was guarding him jumped up. Poplar Fruit then easily bypassed him, accelerated, and got a layup. 3-0. The first group of uncles was easily defeated by Poplar Fruit and the others. We still have to play. Uncle Gene stood up, twisted his waist, and laughed. During the time when Poplar Fruit was not here, Uncle Gene and the others were not idle. In private, they also thought about how to restrain Poplar Fruit. To deal with a super player like Poplar Fruit who could break, shoot, they had to learn from the American NBA. If the other teams could not stop him with 1 player, they would send 2 players to deal with him. The 2 players would attack him from both sides, forcing him to shoot or pass hastily. The biggest problem with 2 players attacking him from both sides was that one of the opponents would definitely run out of space. Then they could only bet that the person who received the ball would not make the shot. After all, they would rather let the role player make 2 more shots than let Kobe go crazy. So, Uncle Gene and the others used this method to deal with Poplar Fruit. Uncle Dao missed a long shot, and Poplar Fruit grabbed the defensive rebound and passed it to Song Jiwen to dribble the ball out of the 3-point line. At this time, Poplar Fruit found that Uncle Dao and Uncle Ban had 1 person close to him to defend, and the other person was nearby ready to attack from both sides. This was to prevent him from receiving the ball. Poplar Fruit's eyelids twitched. He waved his hand to let Song Jiwen, who had no one to defend, attack. However, Song Jiwen's long shot was not accurate. He tried to break in, but Uncle Gene occupied the area under the basket. He could not squeeze past Uncle Gene for a layup, so he had no choice but to retreat and try a long shot. However, the long shot did not go in, and the rebound was snatched by Uncle Gene, who had a big waist. The uncle in Poplar Fruit's team was really not good. He did not know how to position himself, and only knew how to drill under the basket. Although he was also very strong, his lower limbs were weak. Uncle Gene gently pushed him, and he could not stand still. After getting the ball, Uncle Gene took advantage of the weakness of the uncle in Poplar Fruit's team. Uncle Gene forced Poplar Fruit to help defend, and then the ball was passed to Uncle Dao. Uncle Dao accurately shot a long shot, and Poplar Fruit's team lost the ball first. This was not going to work. Poplar Fruit knew that his team's defense was definitely not good enough. He could only fight with brute force. Uncle Gua, let me do it. You guard against him. In the next defense, Poplar Fruit let Uncle Gua guard out, and Poplar Fruit guarded the area under the basket and followed Uncle Dao to grab the rebound. Uncle Gua did not guard against Uncle Dao, and Uncle Dao passed by him with a shake. However, Poplar Fruit did not have high hopes for Uncle Gua. He had expected this situation. As long as Uncle Dao did not comfortably shoot a long shot, it would be a success. Sure enough, after Uncle Dao scored another shot, he finally missed the shot, and the rebound was taken by the younger Poplar Fruit. Although the score was 2-0, and Poplar Fruit's team was in danger, Poplar Fruit was not afraid at all. He passed the ball to Song Jiwen and said, "Mosquito, shoot boldly, don't be afraid." He cruised around the 3-second zone, and Uncle Dao and Uncle Ban followed him like his shadow. Song Jiwen listened to Poplar Fruit's command, took 2 steps inside the 3-point line, and began to take deep breaths. No one guarded against him, and he calmly shot the ball. "No!" Uncle Jean roared, and the basketball bounced high on the basket. He squeezed Uncle Gua and jumped up, and the ball was about to be caught. Suddenly, a big yellow hand appeared in front of him. Uncle Jean turned his head in horror, and saw Poplar Fruit jump to his right. They had seen Poplar Fruit's terrifying jumping ability. And this time, although Poplar Fruit jumped a little later, he jumped higher. When Uncle Jean stopped rising, Poplar Fruit was already 2 heads higher than him, and he was still rising slowly. Uncle Jean looked at Poplar Fruit hopelessly in the air. His right hand reached above the basketball, and then he heavily dunked the ball into the basket. Single-handed midair dunk. Was this a neighborhood court or an NBA court? How could they see such a big dunk here? Everyone on and off the court was stunned. Uncle Jean looked at Poplar Fruit, who let go of the basket and jumped down, and thought gloomily, "How can I play like this?" Without 2 people guarding him, he could easily break through or shoot. With 2 people attacking him, his teammates couldn't shoot, but he could still fill in. There was no way he could guard. The result was obvious. With Poplar Fruit's rebound guarantee, Song Jiwen's confidence increased greatly, and he even hit one of his next 2 shots. In the end, Poplar Fruit's team counterattacked Uncle Jin's team with a score of 3-2. No matter how much he thought about it, he still couldn't see through Poplar Fruit. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.